in here, and there goes the encoder, and we are good to go.
What's happening? How's everybody doing? This is the IT and the D Show, episode 364, broadcasting live from our quarantined homes. This is Bob the Sales Guy. That's Dave the Geek. Randy at Do the Twitters is doing the Twitters. Find us online at itandthed.com, where you can do us a favor, give us a like on the socials, and subscribe to us everywhere fine podcasts are sold.
Yeah, and again, as per usual, no, we're not doing events in September. Maybe October. We'll see how that goes. But hope everybody stayed safe. Enjoyed the long weekend if you got one. Yeah.
So guest this week, once again, the illustrious.
Shout out to long time guy that's been around. Good to see Jeff, Haas, and Andrea Kress got married over the weekend. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, super nice wedding.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are joined by the illustrious Fred Brown. He is our only person we will ever talk to about the Ronas and the COVIDs and the things that are keep us from doing this stuff. But Fred had an interesting presentation that he just gave to Harvard, and I don't know why he's talking to us, but we were lucky enough to have him here. So, Fred, how are you, sir? How's the weekend?
Great. I didn't get much done. I was working on kind of making sure the presentation was up to speed for the group, but hopefully it'll be interesting for you guys.
Nice. So I guess before you dive into that, I guess just a general question, like what's your sense on how things are going right now? You read. I remember you've thrown some numbers at us before. There was another study that just came out that I saw that said we're probably looking at as many as 400,000 deaths by January 1st. What's kind of your vibe on how things are going?
So I think there are a couple of good things in the space, especially what we're doing with vaccines is pretty exciting, and I wanted to kind of give you guys an update on that. Unfortunately, you'll see that we're having some challenges keeping the COVID virus down under control in Thanksgiving, and I can tell you my projections there. It's not quite as bad as 400,000, but we do start to escalate around Thanksgiving, and we have to kind of watch for that. And of course, the economic piece is challenging because Congress has not made any decisions, and it's driving me crazy because there are a lot of people out there who are suffering.
So I think everybody at this point is kind of like, are they even going to bother at this point before the election? As sad as that is to say, because you're talking about another 2 months, but yeah.
Then you either got a lame duck or either way, you got brand new people coming in. They say, well, we got to wait till January, and all of a sudden you got 5 or 6 months.
Right.
You're waiting. So I do worry about that scenario, but I think they're going to come. I think they're going to have to come to a conclusion in the 1 to 1.5 trillion mark. Otherwise, it's just going to be enough unhappiness in the population that a lot of people aren't going to get reelected. It's going to be the problem.
Right. Well, and I know the big thing that I've seen recently is, but there was just an article yesterday where they've approved gyms opening.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't know how this is going to work because
but they make you wear a mask.
I was like, you've got to wear a mask while you're working out. Everything's
they're working out too hard. That's right. Otherwise,
10 feet apart. Everything. Something. I'm really confused how they're going to make that work. But yet, movie theaters are kind of barking that they're still kind of basically on not even on life support. They're on death's door.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, we can make all the policies we want that open up the economy. You can make all the gyms open. You can make all the movie theaters open. You can get everyone on. You can open up all the airplanes. But if people feel like they're at risk personally, they're not gonna engage. They're not gonna be coming. And I miss the good workout. I'm working out downstairs and basement. I kind of I can't.
Oh yeah, us too. You can clearly tell what big gym rats we all are. Yeah, that's
but you miss that really all out workout, and you kind of wonder. But so a lot of the gyms have really worked hard on trying to make this safer, and it'll be interesting to see how things go. I personally think it's going to be really challenging. I heard of one gym, for example, is coming out, and they said, look, we've got 4,000 square feet. We're only going to allow 4 people in at once.
Wow.
1,000 square foot. We've got lots of ventilation. We can open up doors. And that seems like, wow, that's pretty interesting. The other thing that's interesting.
They better be careful. That's how Nancy Pelosi got caught. That's
Well, it turns out that the government. So there's some big government agencies that have had their gyms open the whole time. And
I just saw that. Yeah, there was that story out of San Francisco today that people are pissed.
Yeah, that's right. They are, right? Because they can't go to their gym, but everyone who's making the rules can go to their
Yeah, anybody that's all the gyms in government buildings have been open this entire time. So yeah.
Either they're not working out, not going to the facility at all, which is possible, or but it's not quite as dangerous as we think.
The old saying, Fred, the rules are for thee, not for me.
Yes.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't I talk a little bit about what I presented? You guys can tell me, if it's interesting, that's great. If it's not interesting, we can move right on.
I'm pretty sure none of us are ever going to say to you, but okay.
This is to a group of academics, so it may not, it's sort of interesting. These guys are pretty smart, but we've got a good audience, and I'm sure we're going to get great questions. So we'll just, whenever you get something where you're not sure or not quite right, just let me know and we'll move on, or I'll answer the question. Let's see here. Where's my slides? There we go. Yeah. So when I gave my first talk, you guys saw that about 4 weeks later, and basically Harvard said we have to sit and think about this, whether we want to open this up. Well, this time they allowed it to be opened up in a week after I gave the presentation. That was a lot faster, and so maybe it means that I'm getting less controversial. We'll have to see. But basically, in that first presentation, what I said is around September we're going to have some suggestive scientific evidence that says we're on a track for getting pretty lucky and maybe we're going to get a vaccine pretty quick, or some ways of controlling the virus pretty quick. There'll be some suggestive evidence in place by that point. Let's get back together then, because between then and now, not much is going to happen. So, between April and September, not much really happened. Not really. I mean, a lot happened, but it was all fairly predictable. Let me talk a little bit about the predictability of that. So on March 23rd, our death toll was at 773 and our unemployment was at 4.4%. And at that point, I wrote a paper and I presented some of that to Harvard on April 4th. And in that paper, I said that there will probably be between 145,000 and 180,000 deaths. And so when you have 773 deaths, and you're looking at by September 1st having 180,000 deaths, people look at me like I was on another planet. But I've been doing this for a long time, as have a lot of other modelers, and I thought, that's about what the right range is going to be.
Right. Fred, was April 5th the actual shutdown date? I'm trying to...
No, the actual date was, I think, March 13th to 17th.
Yeah, March. Yeah, because we closed on the 16th, Bob.
Yeah, 16th was.
And that was the day the order came. Or maybe it was the 15th. That was the day the order came out.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah. So that was the day, and so a couple of days later, we were all interested in what's going to be the impact here, and so that I started doing some modeling. I had done some modeling starting in February because I was a little bit worried about what was going on. And I worked
hand modeling. Sorry, that's too easy.
Modeling. just statistical modeling.
Sorry, carry on.
But I did a lot of work with Johns Hopkins. We put up the big death clock because I'm on their continuing medical education group, and we were sort of interested in what's going to look like in September. So we all had a little bet how close things would get, and so the actual was 185 in September 1st. So 100. I said max was 180. So, but pretty close. The maximum unemployment trough was 26%. That was my U6. They have several different indicators of unemployment. U6 is the total unemployment we had to look at as economists, and the jobless rate hit 22.5, a little bit more than that ultimately when you do all the revisions. But so I was, ultimately it was about 25.5%. So I was a little off by a little there. The required stimulus I thought would be 4.2 trillion. Congressional 1 trillion Federal Reserve. Actual was 3.7 by Congress, but of course they couldn't quite get to the next 500 billion they should have because of the politics of the situation. I think they would have gotten to my 4.2 trillion had not been so political at the last minute. 1.2 trillion, I underestimated that. The Federal Reserve has been a real star in this whole thing. I mean, hats off, right? They got in front of this thing. They pushed hard.
Everything I've said, everything I've read said that Mnuchin has just been phenomenally reasonable. Just, hey, look, I'm the guy that executes policy. You come to me with anything reasonable, and we'll do it. Like, but you guys have to figure. But like, yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing sort of go. Yeah, and the Treasury and Fed has sort of been working hand in hand. So it's Mnuchin and the Fed groups. Governors have really been working hand in hand, and what we all know was with exponential growth, right? I kind of talked about last time we talked is that you got to hit this thing hard before you really see the indicators. The indicators have a really early warning, and then you have to do like twice as much as you think. So the Fed did that, and things are looking good on the Fed side. Net economic damage, 2.5 trillion. I was guessing, and it came out to 2.45 trillion. So again, close. And the idea here is that when people say this is unpredictable, that's actually not so true. We can actually get pretty close on predicting this stuff in advance. And I'll show you what the predictions look like out through the end of December, and my best guess today, and we'll see, whether those come right or not. I hope not, because this is not a great. Obviously, these are not good scenarios for us.
So what you're saying is everyone that's watching at home now should go pour themselves a drink and strap in?
Oh yes, definitely. A bartender is necessary for this presentation. You want to have a bartender standing by. At least that, if not more. So what I've been doing since we talked, last time, as you guys know, but Harvard didn't, as I've been working with lots of state governments, lots of national governments. I do all this work for free because luckily I've got companies that also consult with me and they pay me. Otherwise, I mean, as it is, I'm eating a lot of casserole, but at least I'm able to kind of stay afloat on the financial side of the situation. And I feel badly for guys who, are on the wrong side of that equation. So hopefully things will be turning around. All these opinions, projections they're mine. I have worked with a lot of these companies. They've allowed me to reveal all this material. So if you like the material, you want to use it, feel free to jump on the website, fredbrown.com, pick it off and use it like you like.
Awesome.
All for you. So at any rate, let's see what we got here. So first thing about COVID is it's worse than we thought. I didn't think it was going to be, I thought you can see, I thought it was going to be bad, but the things that make it really bad are, number one, the transmission. We know that, human transmission that is through the air is the worst possible kind of virus to control. And that's what we got with COVID. So that's the first problem. Second big problem is treatment. It turns out is quite variable because there are all these different things that happen when you get COVID. It isn't just COVID, you get some lung problems, and then 8% of the people actually get worse problems. We'll talk a little bit about that. Immunity, we want to get to herd immunity, and that's going to be tough to achieve because we're not sure how long it lasts, and we're not sure how strong it is. So those things are challenges to manage. And then the last thing is that the economic impact has been really off the charts. We're just not used to working with.
So question though. So so transmission has been exceptionally difficult to contain. Is that because of the virus, or is that because of us? Let's be clear.
Well, it actually is because of the virus.
Okay.
I'll tell you a little bit about that. Well, so we can do more, but fundamentally, this virus is tough, and here's why. The first problem with the virus is that asymptomatic patients, people who feel absolutely fine, are just as likely to spread the virus as someone who's super sick. And that makes it really tricky, right? Because if you're feeling pretty good, you don't want to have to wear a mask all the time, and you're going to be going out and saying, I feel good, and breathing and coughing on people, sadly. And though it turns out that 40% of the transmission have occurred through asymptomatic patients. And that's very rare. Usually if you get the flu, you feel crappy, and then you start to be, and those are the symptoms, then you start.
Right.
This is sort of special because you have so much asymptomatic transmission. So it's hard to convince people to wear a mask if they're feeling pretty good and they look pretty good. So you get close to them, and sure enough, you're coming down with something, even though they're not showing anything.
I mean, I'll be honest. That doesn't really surprise me all that much. Like we're basically a nation of, hey, I'm starting to feel better. I'll stop taking my medication.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, adherence is an issue, especially for even for the non-pharmaceutical interventions. The second big thing is that 50% of the spread occurs before symptoms even arise, right? So usually what happens is you get the symptoms, then you start to spread. In this case, 2 days before you get symptoms is when you're at maximum spreadability. And so what they call pre-symptomatic people are spreading this all over the place. And so the last issue is that it can spread invisibly, right? So you're sitting there and someone coughs in an elevator, 2 hours later you go in, the aerosols are still in the air, and you pick up the virus. That literally happened in New York, where we had video camera footage. Here's the guy that coughed. 3 hours later, lady stepped in, boom, came down.
Yeah, I remember. I think we talked about that the last time you were in, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So it turns out if you can stay outdoors, it's 18 times safer than indoors. So do your stuff now. If you've got lots of stuff you want to get done, do it now. Don't wait till November when you have to stay
I was
outdoors.
like, yeah, but we're in Michigan, Fred. That's
I know.
like that window closes probably sometime next month.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Update your HVAC if you're a building professional. Look at HEPA filters. Look at cleaning systems and so on, because that's going to make it. The ventilation turns out makes a big difference.
So what about homes though? Like what about like your regular person at home? You know, is
Regular,
like, should you go and get a duct cleaning service? Should you?
So there are a couple things. Number one, you should open your windows more. Get fresh air in there, open windows a lot. Number two, you can get these little room filtration systems that have UV light that filter stuff. Keep it in the middle of the room and look at and check the certification. What you want to have is something that's going to turn over the air about 4 to 6 times an hour. So if you're sitting in a 20 by 20 room and you've got a group that something that has the capacity, that's 2,000 square feet. So if you've got something with the capacity of 500 square feet in every 15 minutes, that you're going to change over the air quite a bit, and the UVC lighting should kill off some of the viruses.
Oh, you're coming to masks. I got to go run and grab one that I have down here. Keep going. Because I just
Okay.
remembered something I wanted to ask you. Keep going.
Yes, masks work. The issue that we have is, and you'll see this repeatedly through the entire what we've done wrong kind of so far, sadly, is we haven't developed the infrastructure that we need to manufacture and distribute our own masks in the United States. And the same thing's happening in testing, the same thing's happening in gowns, the same thing's happening in hygiene. We're just not producing the stuff we need to fast enough to actually get to the demand we have. The last big thing about transmission that is really weird about this virus is it has a really low K value. And the K value is important because that indicates super spreaders. And if you have a really low number, like 10, 0.1 in this case, 80% of the spread comes from 10% of the infected. That means you can go and do stuff, and not have any trouble. And then you go to one event and 500 people will come down with something. And that is sort of like a magical thing that happens with this virus. So it turns out we don't really know what's causing these super spreading events. It could be certain activities like alcohol consumption, get a little bit closer to people, singing, shouting, rallying, protesting choirs. Those tend to be a little bit more, especially if they're indoors. Certain places.
I don't think you're allowed to say protest.
Indoors with poor ventilation and crowded venues, that's just a killer. And some people, like there's one guy in Italy, he got sick for 3 days, got infected 750 people and died. And that kind of stuff happens. So I think the big future issue is going to be identifying and controlling these super spreader activities and where they are happening and who those people are. And that's going to be challenging for us to figure out. We don't know it yet. So that's about transmission. Then the next thing is treatment, right? We talked about treatment. And the good news is we're getting a lot better at managing these cases. If you got sick back in April, and versus today, you've got about a 20 to 30% better chance of living today than you did back in April. And if you think about it, after over a 6-month period, that's darn good. And we'll go into kind of what's caused that in a second. We now know that it doesn't just kill by respiratory failure; it actually kills also by clotting and sepsis. And so that's 2 different kinds of things you've got to treat simultaneously with this disease. That makes it that much more difficult to really solve. We have had some great successes, especially dexamethasone. This, which is a steroid, and it kind of calms your body down so you don't overreact to the infection. And remdesivir, which actually stops slightly the opportunity for the infection to spread, reducing your hospitalization from 14 days to 10 days. So not great, but it's a start. The bigger thing is we've got our care protocols that have been a lot better, more oxygen, less ventilation, more pronation, figured those things out, which is great. The bad news, though, is that it's a lot less, the mortality, morbidity, a lot less predictable than other pandemic disease vectors. Got diseases from all over the place: lungs, multi-organ blood clotting, you got the heart issues, you got the brain issues. We'll talk a little about that in a second. And then, of course, multiple disease etiologies as well as pathways make it hard to know what drugs are going to work. So we have to actually have cocktails of drugs all working simultaneously rather than just one silver bullet that's going to work in this case. And then we'll talk a lot about long haul consequences. basically this is not a disease you want to get. So the next big issue is going to be developing these cocktails that work variably by person and by the kind of infection you've got out in the practice.
We'll just insert bourbon jokes here and just let it die immediately.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm good. I've got a backstock. I'm good.
So the last area is immunity, right? The good news is vaccines are going a lot faster than I thought they would. I mean, I was predicting we get into phase 3 in September. We got into phase 3 kind of July 11th. I mean, that is fast. And they've enrolled over 25,000 people in this thing across two clinical trials. That's really fast too. So we're doing a really good job in that space, and that improves the odds of approved vaccine, earlier than I actually thought it was going.
But that's some of the pushback that I've seen with some of those stories online, though, is are they moving too fast? Like, are they skipping steps? Are they kind of flipping their way through? They're kind of being flippant on their way through this, trying to get something out and being first.
I promise we'll go into that in a lot of detail.
Okay.
Because that is a great question, and we'll get into that. So we'll go pretty quickly. Not so good news is that sadly we have some reinfection. It seems to be possible. We've got the 3 cases of reinfection we talked about last time. We do see that there is some immunity for 3+ months. We talked about that last time as well. So you got this question of how long does immunity last? And it looks like at least 4 months, and hopefully longer in most people, but we're not sure yet. And of course, we don't know what the viral mutation is going to do under selection pressure. So once you start to affect it with new drugs and new vaccines, the virus could start to shift around quite a bit in terms of the kind of virus that's out there with mutations and so on. And then we have a question of whether you're going to have viral enhancement.
Because that's like you had mentioned that before, that that's one of the concerns with the vaccines, or even just in the labs working on the vaccines, that kind of stuff is, hey, don't oops and accidentally make the damn thing stronger.
Yeah, that can happen. And also, if you inject someone and then it turns out that you start to create immunity in some areas, it can actually enhance the impact of the vaccine on those people by mistake. So the other issue is, the next issue there is going to be the distribution of weak non-durable partial vaccines. We're going to have lots of sort of vaccines that sort of work for this population that aren't completely protective. Not like smallpox, where every time you take it, you're 100% protected forever. These are going to probably initially be more like, well, help me a little bit, but I still can get sick and I still got to watch out. So that's sort of not ideal, and figuring all that out is challenging sometimes. So at any rate, the economics. So now we get into some of the economics, right? There's been a big difference between the economic impact on Wall Street versus Main Street. And you can see what's interesting about this on the slide on the diagram on the right is that the brown graph is actually the weighted average of the FANG group, and that's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. That's FANG, and they've been doing great. And in fact, the rest of the S&P is in the green line below, and they've not been doing so great, frankly, but selectively okay. Overall, though, the market has come pretty much back to where it was in about 3-4 months.
That's shocking.
Shocking, right? Amazing.
Yeah, I did not expect to see that. That's crazy.
I was a little bit surprised. I was surprised that it bounced back this quickly. But it turns out that the reason that's happening is that the Fed is basically taking the counter side of so the Federal Reserve Board, our main reserve bank, is actually taking the counter side of the bet. And they are not commercial. So they don't really care about price. They just want to get money into the economy to kind of bend the curve back down again on the overall impact. So they want to have that trough be as low as possible. They're going to start to push money into these different instruments.
Well, real estate's got to be propping up the economy pretty well. Sub-3 interest rates, and I mean, I sold a piece of shit property. It's been hanging on to in 4 days.
Oh, did you finally dump that?
Yeah, 4 days it took.
So residential doing great, commercial not so good. commercial guys, it turns out people are staying away from their office buildings. People want to have new HVAC.
Right.
They want to start. They're not using the facilities as much. Lots of shutting down is happening. The malls are all closing down. So that the commercial side is really suffering. The residential, hey, we're doing good.
Fred, last week we did an article that commercial is actually fine because the really, really big companies, even though they have employees staying home, they're hedging and they're grabbing whatever they can get their hands on. I'm hoping that in 2 or 3 years,
yeah, they're going to get a good deal now. Yeah,
you're right. There's a huge asymmetry. What's happening is sort of the rich are getting richer, and the big guys are getting bigger, and the small guys are really suffering. And that's sort of, you're right. So you're right. The big commercial guys are probably going to come through this even with flying colors. They're going to buy lots of things at fire sale prices. But overall, the industry is going to have a challenge. And on Main Street, you can see that. Basically 1970, everything's, flip, and then we have this huge peak of unemployment, which has come back down now by half. So we're down at about 8.4%, U3 levels, about 16% still, 16% or so U6 levels, but still getting better. And one of the issues is that the disease, this is largely being driven by the disease. So if you don't take the disease into account in your economic modeling, chances are you're just taking a big gamble. We'll see that over and over again. We're taking big gambles here. So it turns out quantity, quality, and timing of government Main Street stimulus injected into the economy is going to be a huge issue, and we're already seeing that now. And right now, what happened is Michigan actually did really well in this first HEROES Act, right? We got about $1,500 more per capita than the average state. We were the #1 state for getting money because we got a lot of really, high-powered employers who are doing really special, engineering, real specialized manufacturing. Those are good jobs. And when people got laid off to no fault of their own, we then got a lot of the stimulus package because of that. And so we did good. But and so we're putting some money into savings. That's starting to come back down now. And by the middle of September, all those savings are going to be eroded. So at that point, the economy is going to take a hit. And it's going to continue to take a hit unless we get more stimulus back.
Yeah, we talked about that a few weeks ago on our show, that like one of the companies that had like a record quarter was Foot Locker.
Yeah.
Because people were taking their stimulus checks and they were taking the extra unemployment and they were going and buying sneakers. Make your own choices. It is what it is.
The companies that did really well were the companies that were distant. That means they could work remotely, and that were supporting even more distancing. Companies like Amazon, companies like Facebook, and so on. They just help you distance, and they encourage you to doing more distancing. So.
Like GM came across. I think GM, just one of the articles we had on deck for this week was that GM just basically said, okay, all the office workers, you're probably you're home through next summer.
Right, and it's good that they put that expectation in people's minds, because I think they probably did all the math and they said, wow, this is going to take a while to get rid of. Right. No matter what happens, you'll see next summer isn't a bad bet. That it's probably going to take that long plus a little bit. So here. The Fed did a lot of the right thing. They overreacted early. It's appropriate to control exponential growth in virus. They had a disproportionate impact on the U.S. And look at the green bars, how much more the Fed injected into the economy than anybody else. Those other smaller bars are Bank of Japan, European Central Bank, Bank of England. Those are the other three. And you can see the Fed just overwhelms in terms, because we're a reserve currency and we're just doing so much more. What's interesting is that the response we had actually sort of reinforced, again, more asymmetry. So if you look at the smaller black service industries that were minority controlled, they only got 1% of the total stimulus, and they represent a good portion of our economy. So it's like all these asymmetries are starting to be, it's starting to be disproportionate. The disproportionate parts are starting to even increase more than they were before, because we're trying to use our old infrastructures that were in place back in the day when we had economic problems, and we're trying to apply them to this novel virus and thinking, it should work about the same. Well, it doesn't, because it's a novel virus and the minorities are disproportionately impacted versus the regular rest of the economy. And so now we get that asymmetry spiraling around and making it even worse than normal, because we're using these older techniques and tools for a new problem.
Well, I mean, and I think that's the sad reality of, I mean, the PPP. Like, I feel like their hearts were in the right place,
Oh, absolutely.
and they wanted to do the right thing.
They wanted to move banks. That was the right thing to do.
It just, it just wasn't. I mean, because you've got. I mean, there's a story a week now about, oh, Joe Smith got $2 million by faking up some employee records, and the FBI just raided his house and confiscated his Lamborghini and his Ferrari that he bought last week, and yada yada. But I mean, but again, I mean, and it's, like I say about a lot of these, programs out there, there's always going to be people that take advantage of this, of stuff like this, and you can't judge the majority based on, the outliers that skeeve their way into being jerks.
And we had to act really quick to do the right thing, and sometimes when you act that quick, you're going to make some things are going to slip through the cracks. There's no way around it. Now we know more, and hopefully the next round will be smarter and we'll make it better. But we have ways to go. And the other issue is, of course, the more money we pump in, more people are saving, and so the velocity of the we call a multiplier effect in the economy isn't quite as big as we thought it was. So that's why the Fed, I think, also put in more than I was projecting. Now, this is important on the long haul effect. So I was talking a little bit about that. If you look at if you go to Johns Hopkins website and you look at
we got more comments about the long-term effects slides last time than anything. Like, just Jesus, tap dancing Christ. Like,
we've already been through this, right? We went through the Johns Hopkins things in more detail.
Yeah.
This stuff lasts for a long time. So, and I'm a little bit worried about this, right? So we won't have to cover this again because the audience knows about this. But basically, about a third of our patients are still sick, even in this, and they have stuff that we can't treat, and so they're going to have long-term chronic problems. And so, if you get these diseases and you still feel bad, that's 2-3 months later, keep going to your doctor, try to figure out what it is, because you're not abnormal. It's just something that keeps going with COVID, sadly. So the asymmetric impacts we talked a little bit about, female versus male unemployment. Look, I mean, basically for the last 10 years or so, we've had quite similar patterns of unemployment, male versus female. All of a sudden, COVID hits, and you can see it just goes off the charts in terms of the impact on females, and that's because they're, we think, now we don't know 100%, we've done some surveys, we think that it hit women harder than men because women are more likely to work in service industries that are worse impacted, and of course, when schools are shut, they tend to take on a lot of the responsibility.
I was going to say, also, then you've got the caregiver component in there too, yeah.
Yeah, especially with single parent homes, that happens a lot. And of course, there's a lot more asymmetry. The poor die and lose their work at higher rates. The non-whites die at higher rates, and you can see that on the other parts. So we've got the economic impact again on the left side. Then we have the health impact on the other side. And what people say is, oh, it's 2 to 3 times worse if you're a minority. Well, if you then age adjust that, right, all of a sudden it's actually like getting closer to 4 times worse. And if you look apples to apples on the populations that are getting impacted. And there is no, what's interesting, we studied this pretty carefully. We have not found any host biological racial factors that can cause this kind of mortality impact. So we're pretty sure this is all due to the social pieces, all due to the continued health care that's happened from birth all the way through today, which happens when you have untreated chronic conditions, you get more susceptible. You've got a lot of extra minorities who are in the essential and service worker categories. You've got housing issues that are where you're in more crowded communities, and you've got multi-generational families who can't isolate more as easily, and you've got lots of overrepresentation in metro areas with difficulty with what we call social determinants of health, which are combinations of education plus the income levels, plus the healthcare access, plus the nutritional, all those things start to come together, and it creates this kind of a problem. And so the rich are getting richer, and the rest of us are all getting sicker, which is a sad truth about the whole thing. So what we talked about last time was we have 3 kind of big strategies that we see people putting in place. We'll move on to the strategy part. We can get lucky, and that means you have a silver bullet, right? And you have
So we'll call that one the lottery.
This is the lottery. Yeah, perfect. Well, how about lottery? The lottery is the lottery. And here we are betting on the number. The number says, hey, great news. You got a safe, effective cure. Vaccine can be approved 4 times faster than ever has happened in the history of vaccine development. And supply will be sufficient to basically distribute to 6 billion people in the next 2 to 3 years. That's the lottery. If you get that, you've won it. And we have a big bet on that right now. And if that happens, the U.S. is going to come out, smelling like roses. Then you got the brutal, right? And that's what we talked about with Sweden and some of the others, where we're saying it's a bet on natural immunity. This is a natural thing. Everyone will get sick. We'll get antibodies, and eventually the antibodies will stop the disease. So the assumption is it's going to cost less to just let COVID run the herd right through the population than it will be to implement an economic shutdown.
So that's the GM Pacer defense, I believe we called it. That was yeah.
That we get sanitizing immunity. Everything's wonderful after you get infection, and you better that immunity better be durable. Otherwise, you got to run the herd every year. That gets really brutal, which is why we call it the brutal survival of the fittest kind of weight. And then we have the marathon, and I thought we were going to be on this path. Basically, you've got sort of the natural progression, which we've seen in the past of having some diagnostics and non-pharmaceutical impacts, better hygiene. Then we move to drugs. It helped kind of control the virus a little bit, and finally we get to a good vaccine that really ends the shutdown. And I thought that might be 7 to 10 years out. And unfortunately, that means we're going to have a bad economic time of it for a while. So those are the three basic strategies. And what's happened is people place their bets, right? Around the world, people place their bets. So in the United States, we think we're going to get lucky. And Russia thinks the same thing, right? With Russia, they got their Sputnik 5 vaccine that's out there, and everything else is running, which is, so those are two really big, important economies. Both have excellent pharmaceutical capabilities.
Okay, so for clarity, what are all the red dots?
The red dots is where we have infection.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, this is where things are on fire.
Gotcha.
So we're paying a higher price for our bet than the Russians are. But they might not be reporting as much as we are either, frankly. So then they have the brutal strategies. You can see the brutal guys are basically South America and India, and they just said, we can't afford. We got a lot of young people. We're going to let this go run its course. Our average age is 15. A lot of people won't die. So, and our economies need to have work. We need to keep going. So we're going to go with brutal. And Sweden did that too. They said we think we can protect the guys who are really old. We think we can get everybody sick enough fast enough that we're going to get herd immunity with it. And then the last part, the yellow dots, and those are the guys who are going the marathon. Those are the guys who have big infrastructures in place. They're doing testing. They're doing lots of hygiene. They've got masks for everybody every day, and they're very careful. They're very careful about what they're doing. They have lots of import export. You can't go in there very easily if you come from the United States, for example. They're shut down largely to us because they're worried about us moving our bet over to them, basically. So
well, yeah.
Yeah, right. You've been working pretty hard on controlling everything and spending lots of money doing that, and then you got some guy from the United States saying, "Hey, let's take a look at all the."
Yeah, I mean, you don't invite the guy that's already puking at the bar back to your house for another drink. You just no, you don't.
That's sort of the right effect. Yeah, exactly. So that's where we are. And interesting, there's some African states that went through Ebola, and they're being really careful too. So that's sort of where we are with the world. And now I thought we could here's some lessons learned. Number one, the countries that have gone through pandemics recently, they've actually come through pretty well, right? I mean, we hear about the Koreans, we hear about the Taiwanese, and that's because they had SARS and they had a lot of other pandemics that were sort of threatening, that H1N1, swine flu, all those things went through. And so they're kind of used to responding pretty quickly.
I was going to say, and I think we talked about this probably a couple of times ago when you were on, was part of the issue with our response is that SARS just kind of petered out in Canada before it came to us, so we were like, we'll be fine.
Canucks took care of it for us. We did great, right? The good neighbors, excellent. Unfortunately, we're one of these countries lacking recent pandemic experience, and so we're going up a pretty steep learning curve. I'm working with mayors and governors of all kinds of different states, and it doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. Doesn't matter if I'm working with countries that are dictatorships or democracies. I try to help everybody, and if you're in one of those states that is not used to doing this, you're having some challenges. That's just the way it is. And that generally countries that take a unified national approach did better than the countries that were more regional, because they couldn't get the scale of learning and the scale of the manufacturing in place in time. So that's sort of big lessons learned. And this is what's happened. Basically, I think our biggest risk, and I work, I work all over the place. And the biggest
I
thing
don't even know what this says yet, but every time I see a graph with a curve like this from you, I just clench.
So nature's basically just relentless, right? I mean, it's going to fill in every pore, every cavity, everything you miss. It's going to be there. It's just going to be on top of you. So if you leave a stone unturned, it's going to fill it in for you. And so if you and basically, I think that people are just getting tired out. They're just saying, enough of this. I want to go out. I want to have my life. I want to just do my stuff. I'm not going to, let me go out to the restaurant and have a beer with my friends. And this is probably our biggest risk, is this fatigue factor. And you can see basically, as a world, this is the real graph of real cases every day. You can see the scale. We're up at, closing in on 30 million. And we have not controlled this thing at all. It's having its way with us. We're basically losing this war on a global basis. We're definitely losing this war, right? I mean,
and like you were just talking about, the fatigue syndrome, and I've seen that with. I have it sometimes, and it's but I've seen it with a lot of my friends and that kind of stuff. Like, that's just a psychological issue. How do you even try to combat that?
Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting articles about how, trying to get reset. And on an individual basis, it's taking stock, it's being able to meditate, it's taking breathing lessons. Some people put their head in an ice bucket to kind of reset their whole. That's an individual. On a societal level, it's doing networking work and trying to find purpose at a societal level and keeping up the social capabilities. And it's hard for some people who don't have the technology in place to do that safely, or who are kind of like young, especially young people. I feel so sorry for them. They're building their networks, or getting, they're learning new stuff about the social environment, and this is just getting in the way of that. So at any rate.
Oh yeah, I mean, my kids will quote unquote meet their teachers tomorrow via a drive through the parking lot, and like waving and saying hi. I mean, that's crazy to me.
Yeah, and for the kids, that must be really a bummer, right? And I'm teaching this year, and it's just completely different vibe. It's not fun. You sort of sitting there in front of a TV. It's just miserable. So at any rate, so fatigue is our big risk. Now let's focus on the United States. So the United States, what the conclusion to this was, nature is relentless, and so you got to have a strategy. If you don't have a strategy with nature, you're going to get beat up bad. So here's what's happened in the United States. I think this is sort of my analysis. Basically, we have offsetting strategies. So the United States federal government bet, and they're implementing this extremely well, is we're going to get lucky. We're going to hit the lottery. We're going to bet on vaccines. It's an all-out bet. And we're going to get lucky and everything's going to be great, because it doesn't even matter what happens at the state level. You guys do ahead and do it whatever you want, because we're going to have a vaccine and we're going to overcome.
Okay, so what's the shading here?
Yes. So the green, light green, are the marathon bets, right? New York, they've got very careful testing. They put in infrastructures. They've got hospital expansions. They're, they went in and got lots of H1N1. They've got supplies up the wazoo. They've got hygiene here. They're, every store.
Okay, I need a sanity check. Like, that's purple, right? Not green.
The ring.
That's green. The marathon.
Oh, the ring. No, I'm sorry. I meant the actual shading of coloring on the United States map itself, not the circle.
Oh, that's where you have breakouts.
Okay.
These are breakout areas. Yeah. This is about a month ago, but it's still pretty accurate. And then you got the blues. The blues are the brutal bets, right? You got Florida. DeSantis is saying, go for it. Just, keep things open. Everything's going to be fine. Keep pushing. South Carolina, same thing. Iowa, same. Ernst, which is blowing up right now. South Dakota, same thing. Just keep going. Keep pushing. And so what's interesting is those brutal bets, because we have so much flow back and forth between states. We're a single country. People are driving back and forth. My niece from Iowa just stopped by to see me in Detroit on her way to Boston because she's going back to school, and she was here on Saturday. And Iowa has a 22% positivity rate. We got a 3% positivity rate. So she's a great vector to come right through our state and affect everybody. And that happens all the time, right? We're seeing people. So what's happening is we have these offsetting strategies. So as a result of having offsetting state level strategies, we got nothing. We don't have a strategy because everyone's sort of counteracting each other's.
Well, I mean, and we've seen it, and we've seen it here where, okay, yeah, I live in Southeast Michigan, and the bars are closed. I'm driving 30 minutes to head down to Ohio where the bars are open. Why not?
Absolutely.
Or I'm okay, Detroit, everything's on lockdown. Traverse City is open. I'm going to drive up there and hang out for the weekend. Great.
So those are that's what really happened in the United States. We have a federal strategy, it's getting lucky, and then everything else is just offsetting each other. And the problem with not having a strategy when you're up against nature that's just relentless is that you can't focus your resources. All these resources are extremely confined. The number of N95 masks we got, the number of vaccines we're going to have, all those resources are really confined. And so we don't have a way to really distribute it appropriately. Decision making super slow because you can't make it. Everything's confused. You're not sure which way you're going. You don't know what to measure anymore. There's nothing consistent. Your economies of scale. I can't tell you how many mayors I go and see, and you got to start over with them, explaining exactly what numbers they need to collect and why that's important and what to monitor. And every time I'm going to a new state, and they're saying, "What do you mean positivity?"
Fred, be honest. How many times a day do you shake your head?
So we don't, and so all this stuff means that basically we're just sort of wallowing in tide is setting you one way and the wind setting you another, and you're just sort of rocking in the boat and getting sick, and that's what's happening to us right now. And which is, it's okay if the big government bet pays off, but it's not okay if that big government bet doesn't pay off. So that's what we're going to look at next. So if you think about fighting nature, that we need a strategy. There are two kind of big strategies, right? We've got sort of the hunter-gatherer strategy, and the guys go out every day and they hunt, and the women help them, kind of killing stuff, and basically all the decisions are delegated to the individual. Individuals tend to counteract each other. There's no real resolving strategy. You don't really prioritize much, and so what happens? There's lots of reinvention and no real learning. And there's no scale. So what happens is you get a steady buildup of COVID. On the other side, you've got the kind of the careful agrarian society that's very, cultivates its stuff and focuses its resources, and you have mutually supported investments and returns. And what happens there is we hit the thing hard, as a combined society, and then we try to manage the little ripples that happen later. So those are the two big ways we have to fight. And if you think about that, and that's sort of the general thing. And then there's disaster remediation, right? And for some kinds of disasters, like hurricanes that go through, fires that come through, you sort of have one big peak of a disaster, and then nothing beforehand, nothing afterwards. You clean it all up, you bring in FEMA, everything's cool, right? So it's a big peak of a response, and then it's done. The other kinds of disasters are much longer-term chronic disasters, like the biological ones. It's slowly to start like this, slow, and then they just take off logarithmically. Or the climatological ones, which we're going to, which we're trying to fight as well. And there, after each event, which are progressive, you want to kind of, continue to ratchet it down so you keep it in control. That's sort of the test and response, guided response, and so on, right? The longer haul. To do this, you really have to have new multifaceted tool sets to do it right. So what happens is, let's combine those, right? So the U.S., we have the kind of hunter-gatherer, overall slow growth. So we have lack of strategy there. So we have a steady buildup of growth in the background. It's happening. And then every once in a while, it's peaked by a big outbreak. Oh, crap, New York's on fire. Oh, no, Florida and Texas and California having trouble, right? And so we have a big event, and that's what our pattern looks like. In China and Europe, what it looked like was a big event, and then a hard shutdown strategy that controls after the first spike, and then you have sort of little lumps afterwards. So what does that combine to look like? It looks like this, right? Here's the U.S. model, and here's the Chinese and European model. And if you look at that top one, that's the U.S. model. Well, that was what we thought would happen, and here's the actual, right? So we have a steady increase in the background, and we got then we got New York there, the peak of New York, and the peak of Texas and Arizona, right? That's exactly what it looks like.
So, and here's I get, like, here's the sad reality of this, and I think I'm interpreting this correctly, and just based on where we are as a society at the moment, like the cat's out of the bag. Like, there's no way right now that we could go back and say, or like, hey, you know what? That hard shutdown thing was a great idea. let's go ahead and do that now, 6 months in. Like that's just not feasible.
Well, so what's interesting about the hard shutdown is we've had a lot of theoretical guys look at the hard shutdown, right? Because it cost us a lot of money, and trillions of dollars, literally. And so University of Chicago did a big study, Northeastern University did a big study. These guys are smart guys, and they do kind of standard models of, does it work? Did it pay off? And their answer was that shutting down actually, in terms of saving productivity and the economy overall, that shutdown actually was 2 to 5 times more effective than if we hadn't shut down. So it's sort of interesting that you'd think it was a disaster, but in fact, when you really run all the economics, counterintuitively, maybe, and admittedly it's pretty academic, but their calculations are that we actually did pretty well by shutting down when we did.
No, and I get that, but I mean, I keep going, like, I'm just trying to think, and it does. It seems, I was laughing with it, like, do you remember, like, Tiger King was like 6 months ago, like not even 6 months ago, but like quarantine just has completely different meanings for people now. But so like just trying to think back to like 6 months ago, and okay, yeah, it was a shutdown, but it wasn't really I don't think, like, when I think of a hard, like, I don't think we ever really had a hard shutdown. Like when I think of a hard shutdown, I think, dude, the 7-Eleven at the end of my street is closed. Because I mean that's the thing. I mean, like, just where we were as a society, the grocery stores were still open, which meant that the shipping people still had to, they were still open in manufacturing and transportation, and then you had, so I mean, we didn't really, what I would think of as a hard shutdown, I don't think we went through here. A lot of people would say we did, and so that's why I question that terminology for the U.S. in particular.
And you're right. If you they have scales for shutdown, and it kind of behavioral scales. It says, how shut down really were we? And we were about 45. We were sort of in the middle of the shutdown spectrum. Really, really shut down societies when you're 90 plus. That means you let one family member out of your house for half an hour a week to go shopping and walk the dog, and that's the only reason you go out of your house. That's a shutdown. And if you turn out to have COVID, they take you out of your house and put you physically into a different facility where you're completely isolated from everything. That's the Chinese level. So that's a 90% shutdown. That we didn't have. Right. And we probably don't want that either. That's all.
Well, I mean, would we have? Yeah, we may not have wanted it, but it's the solution you need, not the solution you want. It's
so we've made some trade-offs. The biggest issue that I've got with our strategy is that we've been focusing on these local outbreaks. They say, oh my gosh, we got a problem. It's sort of like children's soccer. Oh, there's the ball over there. And everyone runs over to the ball over there, and no one's thinking about getting the ball.
That's outstanding. Yeah.
Shutting down the little thing right in their area, and they're not thinking about the bigger picture. And
exactly. Yeah, kids soccer and hockey, just a little bubble of people following the ball. Right? Yeah,
barking the ball. And the problem is the big picture is that black line. It's what's happening really, and the real truth is we're not controlling this thing. So these peaks and valleys and all that other stuff, that's all a bunch of interesting stuff that obscures the real picture. And the real picture is this black line. And
hey, Fred.
Yes.
Now, what I'm hearing, and tell me if this is like BS or not, but I'm trying to follow different sources to try to come to, everybody spins it different, but yes, they said the cases are still growing. Hospitalizations are in the toilet. Deaths are almost minimal right now, or is as low as they've ever been, because younger people are getting it and they're asymptomatic. So
that's right.
But they're counting them as cases, so we give it a +1. But in the grand, I guess the big picture, you got because we always I try to look at hospitalizations. I try to look at death count. I try to look at the different things that, So I guess we're looking at real growth, but I guess talk to me about, am I right, or are those in terms of deaths and everything else being like minimal right now?
Yeah. Yes. So deaths are going. And this is new cases a day. So this is case incidents. On the next slide, I'll show you death incident.
Okay.
But you can see what happened was.
Well, I think part of that was what you were just talking about earlier. With we know more now, and so if you check into the hospital with it, it's not as dire as it was back then. Yeah, we do know a lot more now. What's interesting about what you were saying about was what happened was
that on the caseload, it's these plateaus, these flattenings. If you look at where we were in June, that was sort of our minimums, right? And we were at around 20,000 cases a day, which is, that compares to Europe where they were down in the, 50 cases a day. So we're orders of magnitude, above what we should have been. But if you go to the next plateau, we're at 40,000 cases a day. See how that the plateaus are getting steep, higher and higher each time. So we're solving the next plateau, that's at September 1st. You can see it sort of flattening out now. And that's going to flatten for a little while. It'll be at 40,000 cases a day, maybe 35. But our low on the plateau in June was 20,000. So we're double the baseline for the next outbreak to hit. And that's what's starting to get a little bit scary, right? So now, and these peaks and valleys are sort of obscuring the fact that we've got relentless growth underneath the whole system. So here's what's going. So now the question is about deaths, and you're right. This is I'm most interested in deaths because I think that shows how good we're doing against the whole thing and as a whole. And you can see our max death rate was about 2,700. It happened in May. It was a data outlier. We really hit max death April 10th. But we had slowness in reporting and so on. And you can see every once in a while we have to add a yellow line in there because we have many deaths that we suddenly said, oh, that turned out to be COVID. If you look at China's deaths, it went up, and then that yellow line just went like 20 times higher because they were underreporting for the whole time of October, November, and December, and they just all of a sudden they put everything in and were honest about it in about February, as I recall. So all of a sudden we realized, holy cow, this thing is like 15 times more, it's about 3 times more deadly than we thought it was, because we were looking at Chinese data and thinking, well, we're going to get to the peak soon, and we weren't getting to the peak, and that was because the local, it wasn't the central government, it was actually the local government guys, the bureaucrats who were sort of worried about reporting all this stuff, and they sort of this whole thing.
So we're trusting their numbers now.
Right now, I'm working with a few of these scientists from China, and I do trust their numbers at a high level. Yeah, it certainly October. The problem really was October, November, December when they should have been reporting this stuff and they weren't, and that really threw us off. As President Trump keeps reporting back to, these guys sort of caught us with our pants down because they weren't reporting the real facts. And that there's some truth to that. We made some mistakes too. So we're all when the problem's this big, trust me, there's more than one person making there.
Well, yeah, and I think that's part of the issue. Just talking about numbers in general is every week, again, once a week, there's a story. Oh, such and such lab screwed things up and contaminated an entire batch of test results, and it's hard for people to know what they should be trusting or not.
Yeah, and these are the best numbers we've got, and there are going to be some some data challenges. And you can see the weekends they don't report enough, and then it pops up on Mondays or that terrible So that's why we take the 7-day average, and that black line is pretty accurate. For us, it's pretty accurate. So what do you think is going to happen next? You think we're going to be sort of plateauing at 1,000 a day? You think we're going to be going down at 500 a day? Or think we're going to be looking like Europe at less than 50 a day by the end of December? Those are the kind of the options that it looks pretty reasonable to expect, right?
No, it's only 6% of that, Fred. I had to, sorry.
Unfortunately, most of the modelers think that we have to watch that trend line that's going like this. Remember, I talked about exponential growth slowly coming, and well, we think it's more like this.
Right.
And it's not quite as bad as some of the other models. Some of the other models are coming out with 400,000 deaths by December 31st, and they might be right. I might be underestimating. It depends on a lot of things.
I was going to say, so I'm assuming the next slide gets into why, because why?
Exactly. So why? Exactly. So we think that we're going to be up close to 5,000. At least my models indicate that at the end of the year we could be at 5,000 deaths a day, and that's that's twice as many deaths per day that we were having at our max in April. And that was a pretty bad period of time. And we could be, and we're likely to be over 300,000 deaths. And this was my projection, on August 1st. So, I was projecting this already for some time, but I wanted to let things settle in to see whether I was feeling good. And okay, let's see what happens. And a lot of other groups are coming up with the same thing now also. In fact, their numbers are jumping higher than mine even. But at any rate, the reasons. The reasons are that the reasons are that we're not in control of the virus. On a fundamental baseline black line that I showed you before, we're just not in control. And so that is likely going to expose us to exponential growth. And we think that exponential growth is probably going to happen around Thanksgiving. We're going to start to really feel the push from Thanksgiving to Christmas and then into the middle of January. And then, of course, we have the November move inside. We've got the politics, where we've got the election and either a lame duck or President Trump being reelected and saying, no, keep going with the old strategy. I have a mandate now. The flu season is going to add to the challenges, although it's going to be less than we think, I think, because we're washing our hands so much. We're having more rationing. We have an overhype of the vaccine, and the real chance is that we could start to depend so much on the vaccine, we move into a brutal strategy saying, let's just wait for the vaccine, let things run. So that's what's causing that whole thing. So our forecast is a pretty bad winter, right? The good news is that we could make things better on our own with our own behavior if we start to wear masks more often, but there's still a big divide there. The viral migration is going to move from hotspots to big regions, and the virus is going to spread into the countryside where healthcare infrastructures aren't as good. The big issue here is that once you get to 7,000 to 9,000 deaths a day, you're going to start to overwhelm the entire hospital infrastructures. And that's the point where the rest of the country says, wait a minute, this is out of control. Right now, as long as people stay in hospitals, people think things are pretty much in control. As soon as people start to see, ambulances backing up, lots of refrigerator trucks, piling up, and
Right.
then people start to say, this could impact me, and I want to be able to go to the hospital, and so I'm going to be upset if I can't. That's going to happen at 7,000 to 9,000 cases a day. At that point, we're going to have a lot of problems.
Well, I mean, to Bob's point, I mean, I think that's one of the very first things that I learned from, I mean, your first, appearance here with us was to ignore the number counts, but pay attention to the hospitalization rates and utilizations and all that kind of stuff, because that's truly where the issues are going to hit, if they're going to hit.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have, it's going to sort of bumble along in September, bumble along in October. We might have a little blip in a couple of weeks because of Labor Day, but it's not going to be that bad. And then middle of October, end of October, things are going to start getting into a challenge. And by, end of November, it'll be bad.
Well, I was going to say, and it's some of that. I mean, like I said, we've got schools opening up.
Yeah.
The holiday season, you're looking at, kids that may have gone off to school that are coming back home. They've been at the parties and all that kind of stuff, and now they're bringing that back with them because it's like you've said since day one, the whole you're asymptomatic. That's great. That doesn't mean you don't have it. And then you're passing more than the mashed potatoes to grandpa.
That's exactly what. Yeah, that's exactly right. So now we'll go into some new stuff. What's the result of all this? And we talked a little bit about the three things you can do. You can get social distancing. That's sort of level one. You can get drugs. You can get vaccines. So here are the grades. I was talking to Harvard, and that's here are the grades, right? And basically, we're on academic probation. here we got gone through the first semester, and
I feel like we're on double top secret probation at this point.
Maybe double secret probation. And some things have gone really good, like the partying has been really great. I've joked, the vaccine management we've done really well, and now we have to make sure we can implement. We'll take a look at that in detail. Drug management, sort of average, a little below average, frankly. Selection of repurposed technologies, that's been pretty good, except our clinical trial regulatory management, we haven't been managing our studies very well, and our market management has been kind of miserable also. So, we're still passing, but barely. The interesting area is the NPI management. That's really what we have to work with right now. That's things like testing and washing your hands and, the boring stuff, right? It's not really high technology. It really is, it turns out, but we've been ignoring that. We'll get into that in a while. That's a fundamental fail. We just haven't been doing that well at all. IT management, we've been doing pretty well, right? And device management, we've been doing. If you're a manufacturing in the space, you've been doing really well for yourself, but you're under ethics review because there's a lot of
supply and demand, yeah.
So that's sort of the grades. So let's take a look at the different areas. So now we're getting into a lot of the detail, right? The first part of the detail is mask wearing and PPE. so in order to do NPI, which is non-pharmaceutical interventions, not drugs, not vaccines, but just the masks, it's the gloves, it's the hygiene, it's the testing, you have to have that overlapping, because any one of those technologies alone isn't going to be sufficient to control it. So you have to have, if you're a business person or if you're working at a place, you want to have all these things working in concert. Otherwise, you're going to fail to control the virus. And so if you look at the way we're controlling the virus, we've got two big issues. Again, so for example, Taiwan. Taiwan has had 7 deaths. And they have a lot of traffic between Taipei and Wuhan. These guys they have a lot of traffic between China and Taiwan. And they're able to control this. And the reason they're able to control this is because on day 2, after they found their first case, they said every citizen gets an N95 mask every day for 50 cents, period. And so so they actually had a lot of this material. They were shipping off to 3M and France and the United States, and they said, nope, no more shipping to France, no more shipping to the United States. That's ours. We're going to make N95 masks and when we're making N95 masks, we have to have a little bit extra, then it goes to the United States. So they have the very best mask technology, and they wear them. They don't wear them, half the time. They wear them all the time. We're talking all the time, and it's just a social thing that everyone's wearing their masks all the time. So they're wearing a better technology, and they're doing it better, and they're doing it more compliantly than we are.
I'll say if you ever travel to Japan, Fred, like every time I was in public transportation, everyone wore my grandpa's sanding mask, and you'd always look at them funny. But yeah, maybe they knew something we didn't.
Those taxi drivers, they all have a mask, they all wear white gloves.
And they were probably looking at you funny, Bob, because you weren't.
Well, even like, do you ever like a Tokyo taxi? You never touch the handle. They had fresh doilies on the seats. You didn't shut the door; they shut it for you. Like it was a very not touchy, no germy environment. It was.
Yeah, and Taiwan is like that. And if you look at Korea, they didn't do masks so well, but they did test and trace like at a world-class level. They test everybody they get turnarounds in half an hour. They have testing facilities all over the areas that are having outbreaks. They really test. So they also have very low death rates because they do some things with better test technology more often, with greater compliance than we do in Korea. So you can get a sense that with NPI alone, the way we're behaving right now, we're not going to cut it in terms of really controlling COVID. So here is that adherence is really important. This is an example. This is sitting in every office at the University of Michigan Health System on the right. Basically, if you're wearing a mask, you can see the possibility of transmission is 70%. If you're sick and you're breathing on someone who's healthy wearing a mask, that healthy person has a 70% chance of getting sick. So the problem of not having really good technology is you're risking the healthy people. The sick people are, they're going to be okay. If the sick person wears the mask, the transmission level goes way down. If you have an N95 mask, you got no chance of transmission in either direction. And
wow,
they have them, and we don't.
So now, like, I know you had mentioned, I think the last time you were in, you talked about like timing and duration and that kind of stuff being a key. So when you say a COVID carrier without a mask has a 70% chance of infecting a healthy person, like over what time frame? Like, is that a 2-minute conversation in the hallway? Is that a
No. This is a longer than 15-minute conversation.
Okay.
And you're in an enclosed area.
Hey, Fred.
Yes.
What's the risk with a Crown Royal bag? Is there one?
So it depends. If it's fleece, it could cause a greater dispersion of the virus, and it can even worse.
We talked about this last time, Bob. That's the worst possible mask for you to be wearing. That's
the only one I'm wearing.
Great. So
it is very fashionable, though. I like the fashion. So, and that's the issue with NPI, right? If you've got a log 2 kill hygiene versus a log 7 hygiene, well, log 2 means you're killing everything. You're killing, if you have 100 germs, you kill 99 of them with a single dose of the bacteria side or the vaccine killer. If you got a log 7, it's 1 in 10 million survive it. Now the problem is right now, we got a lot of great log kill 7 solutions. We don't have any spray bottles for them. We don't have any wipes for them. So we're sitting there with some of the best technology in the world, but our supply chains aren't, and we'll get into that in a second,
I've never heard that expression before. The log 2 and log 7 kill. What is that? Did I miss that in class? Was I asleep during that portion?
Yeah. So log 2 is 10 to that power. So the kill rate, if you're talking about a kill rate, that means 100, right? Log 10 to the second is 100. 10 to the 7th, you're talking about 10 million. You're killing a lot more germs when you kill 10 million than when you only kill 100. And these technologies make a difference. And we don't have the best technologies at play anymore. And we'll talk a little bit about why right now. So what happened was with our supply chains is we tried to use our existing technology and our existing supply chains to cure a brand new disease state, right? And so the free market works pretty well if your supply is, say, 5, and you want to move to a supply of 6 because your demand increases. So if you want to increase, supply by 10%, 15%, 20%, you can adjust that with price and do pretty well, and increase your capacity over time. Everything's going to be fine. That is great for free market. But in our case, our demand for this NPI stuff, our demand for masks, went from 1 to 50. You can't expand your supply chain fast enough to meet the demand, right? You can't go from 1 to 50.
Well, I mean, I think we saw that with toilet paper. I mean, that's
that's another example. Right? That's a worse example, but in this case, it's continuous. We just can't. The problem is that we actually need 50x toilet paper. We don't probably need. Well, of course, we may be
right.
Excreting a little bit more than normal, but not that much more than normal. But this case, you actually need this stuff in order to save yourself. And so that's a real demand. And so basically, if you look at masks, it was a 50x increase. If you look at alcohol swabs and rubs, it was about a 15 times more we needed for alcohol and hand washing and 70% alcohol scrub. For gloves, it was about a 20 times more. We needed about 20 times more gloves than we originally had. When you talk about that level of demand increase, you just can't handle it. And so in the United States, so in other countries, what they did is they said, we are going to increase the supply. We're going to cut off everybody else. We're going to increase the supply. The United States said, no. We can go out and compete. We're rich. We're going to go buy this stuff up. But national governments came in and said, no, it's not available, like Taiwan.
Well, yeah, you can't buy it if nobody's selling. Yeah.
That's the problem. Right? So, and furthermore, we couldn't increase our demand, our supply that fast, even if we wanted to. So the first thing we did is we said, we're going to suppress the demand. So tell everybody the masks don't work. The N95 masks are only, now then they said, oh, it does. Turns out N95 masks do work, but it's really only for healthcare workers. They need them. Everyone else shouldn't have them. They said test only if you have symptoms, right? Then they delayed all the CDC guidance that was going to increase the demand for all this stuff. And then they said the vaccine is coming, and so they basically suppressed our demand. And they said, from now on, only healthcare workers can have this. Well, when they got to the healthcare workers, they realized they still didn't have nearly enough. They were still down by a factor of 8 or 9. So the next thing they did is they rationed it. They said to the healthcare guys, you can have, here's your mask. I know you need 15 of these today, but you get 1 for the week. And we'll wash it for you and clean it for you and figure it out. But we're going to suppress the demand. We're going to say, and furthermore, FEMA might take all your masks away because they have an outbreak in Florida somewhere.
Right. I mean, that's
masks don't work, but we definitely need them for something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I mean, I think that's what I heard from, friends that were in, that were on COVID floors, that were in the healthcare industry. That I mean, they would get 1 a week that they had to make.
And you put it in a bag and give it to, try to use the UV light and hope that it works, but it's got issues because it's got, at any rate. And then you start to overlap sort of mediocre people. You wear some garbage bags instead of the nice sewn gowns that are coming in from China that aren't available anymore. So that's the next stage, right? And all of a sudden, we ration demand. And the last part, which was really frustrating, is that we actually limited the supply increases. All the guys who are already in the business, and like the mask makers today or the hygiene makers said, we can take care of it. Trust us. We're going to increase so like for masks, 3M said we're going to move from 200 million masks a year to 1 billion. We're going to increase by a factor of 5. Just give us till the end of the year. The problem is we needed 10 times that on day 3. And they went until the end of the year to give us 1/10 of what we really needed. So all these, manufacturers that were in place said, we want to protect our markets. This thing could be here today, gone tomorrow, and all of a sudden we got millions of people manufacturing mass all over the place. It's going to kill our marketplace. So please don't, increase the capacity too fast, or we're going to destroy these markets. And so they didn't make any investments in disruptive technologies because it wasn't in their interest. They had sort of a minor sort of industry restructuring to improve scale, but minor. They were sort of, let's agree on what the supply will be so we can kind of push the demand to meet that supply. There was sort of a wink and say, okay, we'll do that at the state level and the federal level. They basically picked winners and losers, and they basically preserved their markets. And every once in a while, when I was out there trying to buy masks for outbreak areas in states, and I was doing this regularly, and I still am for some places that are really hard hit, you call up and you say, we're good for 30,000 masks coming in the airport today, right? Oh, yep. Oh, sorry, FEMA just took that away.
Right.
And so what happened was everyone started hoarding it so they wouldn't get surprised. I even had governors go to airports and meet airplanes at the gate, making sure their masks.
There were quite a few stories of that. Yep.
So that's how and it turns out that all these guys have long-term fulfillment contracts. So if you want to have wipe paper, there's certain kinds of paper that are really good for wipes, and Clorox and Lysol have those contracts with the 2 manufacturers of these wipe manufacturers, like Lonza is one of them, because you want to have certain kinds of fibers that are just so and adhere to the chemical just so, and have sort of a texture that's right, and you get just the right amount of fluid. It turns out it's pretty complicated, the absorption rate of and how much you're getting down on the.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we're all familiar. It's the oh yeah, you can buy the brand name or you can get the generic, and generic might not quite hold up as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they may dry out pretty quick. So all those guys are in long-term contracts, and they're fulfilling their long-term contracts at the expense of all these new manufacturers. That say, hey, we got this COVID stuff. Wouldn't you like to use it? No, we don't. Sorry, we'll see you in a couple of years, because we're all set. And this is what's really happening on the ground in a lot of these critical areas right now, and we're paying for it with the death rate. So here's an example of what's going on with testing, for example. I ran part of this area when I was with Roche and with Boehringer Runheim. And basically, there are 2 big incumbent technologies. There's PCR technology, and there's point of care technology. The PCR technology basically is a very advanced central laboratory technology. It takes a long time to turn around. That's the swabs that you put in your nose. And they cost quite a bit. And they're very, very accurate. They're the best technology we've got out there. I helped introduce a lot of this piece of this technology, and there are 4 big labs in the country that do this. Right, 2 of them are very large, LabCorp and Quest, and they got a couple, two littler ones, and that's all. But we actually have 50 other labs that could be involved. The problem is that these are cow paths. It turns out that it isn't just the lab and the technology; it's also the distribution system and how fast you can get the samples in and out, and whether you're running 24/7,
right,
really all that stuff. So what happens is you start to say, in order to really know and control the virus, you want to be able to test every day and find out what your status is. And if you find out that your status is either sick, you stay home and get well. If you're not sick, you can go out and everyone else will be well too, and you can go on with your life. Well, the kinds of technologies that we need to invest in are very different than the kinds of technologies that are available. The kinds of disruptive technologies that allow us to actually get very, very fast results at a very low cost every day with high accuracy, and can be administered without having a phlebotomist standing by to take your blood, or some fancy lab technician to actually run the test who's got a PhD in chemistry. If you want to just do this at home, you want to do CRISPR, or laminar flow time technologies. Those are the best technologies to do that. But no, these entrenched competitors have no interest in the new stuff, because they're just trying to get by with their old technology.
Yeah, nobody wants to see their replacement come along and make them obsolete. I mean,
you've got a huge investment, and COVID isn't the only thing you're testing for. You're testing for all the blood, all the urine. You're doing all those kind of tests, and you're saying, "Gosh, this COVID thing could screw up my entire business here if I don't be careful." So I'll suppress those technologies, and I'll keep trying to, sort of play with what I've got and do the best I can. But fundamentally, it's really hurting us, and it's avoiding keep getting this thing in control. And there are all sorts of these new technologies that are out there that we're not investing enough in as a country because we don't have a national strategy, right? We have everything state by state, everyone's scrambling state by state. And so we're not on the game. Europe already has these technologies in place and everything's, Korea does and so on. We don't, which is disappointing because we actually invented CRISPR, we invented CRISPR, and we have more laminar flow capability than anyone else in the world. And we can't seem to get it out the door for our own people. It's like, come on, what's wrong with this picture? But
sadly, that's almost typical at this point. Like I can't.
It's driving me crazy. So here we are. And so we're, it's sort of like the cobbler's children. And
I'm really curious. Like, you've got, down there, you've got something like breath detection and that kind of stuff. Like, honestly, like the only way, like, can it be like something that it can be a dongle that I plug into my phone and I breathe into that and.
Yeah, breath detection. So, and it's an Israeli technology, actually. We didn't invent this one, but you breathe into it, and instead of taking your nasal swab, it actually can detect the COVID in your breath, and it only takes, and then they have the centralized lab capabilities right on site because you're able to go through and not go through, lots of elaborate procedures and reagents and sending things off. You just have the test analyzed right there on site.
I mean, you release something called iCovid, and anybody with an iPhone will have, it'll be sold out within days.
Yeah, and also, so I'll show you. There's a group at Stanford who has this capability. There's a group in Boston who has this capability. There's a group at Yale that has this capability, and basically they are low-cost tests that cost $1 to $5 a piece. They're reasonably accurate, kind of 80% accuracy. It's not quite as good as 85%, but it's pretty darn good. You don't have to use to spit into this thing. You wait 10 minutes. You spit into the detector system. You wait 10 minutes, put it in a detector, and it'll give you a result and tell you whether you're okay or not. You could have that and these detectors are over your telephone. Basically,
spit in your phone, Fred.
Spit on a detector, and then the detector actually reads the. It's cool.
Oh,
very cool technology. The
dongle, Bob. Dongle. So it's all about the dongle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
USB's broke.
Really cool stuff. So this is what it could look like, and we're just not executing. So. The next big area we've got is drugs, right? And we talked about the fact that the death rate's declining, and part of this is a result of drugs. So if you kind of look at what we got out there, we got remdesivir. About 5% of the patients are eligible for remdesivir because it's the 14-day patient wants to go to the 10-day patient, so you give it to them. I think if we start testing remdesivir earlier, by detecting people earlier with better testing technology, then we'd be able to get remdesivir into patients much earlier and have an even better result. But right now, it's only good for patients that are having a very late stage. And so the overall impact is around 1%, a little bit less than 1% on the overall disease. Antibodies, we just had the convalescent plasma being passed, right? They were just allowed now to go in under what they call EUA.
Right.
It's got issues, it's got, at any rate. So the EUA is the emergency use authorization, and we were sort of surprised by that because they didn't really have tests done on this appropriately. But we think, based on our experience with Ebola and a few other viruses, that we're going to get about 2.4% impact. And dexamethasone, that's a real winner. I mean, 1% of the patients are probably eligible, but it has a 20 to 30% improvement in mortality rate. So overall, I think that the drugs are improving our capability to save people by at least 5%, probably, maybe even a little bit more, I've been a little bit conservative. About 10% of the reason that people are being saved and living longer is because we have better clinical methods and care pathways. And the rest of it is as Bob said, because we're treating younger people. So.
Well, and I would assume some of it is just because, the hospitals aren't slammed right now.
Oh, yeah. Once you get into hospital being slammed, then you get to 2 to 15 times the death rates.
Right.
Yeah. So there are some really big upside opportunities. They're all cocktails, like we talked about before. 3 to 5 antivirals, for example, are coming through right now. They can intercalate and start to really impact the viral infection replication. In fact, they're so effective sometimes they kill you because they've intercalated with all of your own cellular machinery. But you start backing that off, and you get a pretty good improvement in the overall control of the virus. That's probably 5 years away, 5 to 7 years away. The antibodies are slightly faster. More easily available, we think, probably in about 3 years. There's a cocktail coming out of Stanford. three monoclonals. They're talking about how with 5 monoclonals. Regeneron has a number of Eli Lilly has a number of monoclonals that look good. And this is the natural progression of the convalescent therapy into the monoclonal therapies. And then we have the immunomodulators. And here, these are the things like dexamethasone. And we think that that'll actually help with these long haul effects, but they'll take a long time to develop. So the big thing that happened, I talked about, and this is worth talking about because this is really exciting. This is our big bet, right? Our big bet is on vaccines. So I probably talked too long. I have to go fast. So the vaccines are what happened with EUA.
It's like every episode. I have no idea. I don't even know what the hell time it is, Fred. I'm just.
Here's what's happening. I'll try to go faster. So this is really cool. So what's happening with the vaccines is up until a week ago, I didn't think it was going to be possible, right? But a week ago, the FDA got together and they said, we're going to give emergency use authorization to convalescent therapy, so you guys don't have to go through quite the level of FDA scrutiny and review as you would normally. So if you do that with the vaccines, here's the vaccine race. And you can see that Moderna's in the race, Pfizer's in the race, J&J and AstraZeneca. Those are guys in the race. And right now, we thought that at the middle of June, we would have the first, what they call full licensure for the general public, vaccine available, right? That's sort of when Moderna and Pfizer all both come together about the same time.
All right, and then I guess again, just for clarity, bottom left, we're looking at July 2020.
That's 2020. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's July 2020, and so that's when it started, right? Moderna started on July. That's a great point. So on July 11th, Moderna started. On July 27th, Pfizer started. On September 5th, J&J will start. They started. AstraZeneca started a couple days ago. So that's the race. And you can see the way they've designed their trials, 30,000, 60,000. They've got 2 doses or 1 dose. And it's sort of, interesting to see that all work out. But you do all the math, and it turns out that if you eliminate the FDA submission process and the FDA licensure review process, you don't get a vaccine earliest kind of early June. You get this. You get possibility.
Okay, but isn't that where so if you eliminate the safeguards and controls, you can get it into production tomorrow. That's
well, what's interesting, so the way they design these tests, the way they design these clinical trials is it's called an event-based clinical trial. So what you do is you kind of get enough events and you can show that you have, the events are, you give the person the first dose, you give the person the second dose, in the case of Moderna and Pfizer, and then you have them go out and you see whether, if they get into an area of high infection rates, where in this case I said it was a 10% incidence level, you have 10% of these, say you had 7,500 subjects tested, right? That means you'd expect with a 10% incidence level that people who were not vaccinated would be 750 of them, right? They'd get sick. If you had a vaccine that was 50% effective, then the number of sick people in that group would only be about 375, right? So you can start to see a separation. And it turns out that 375, 400 patients is getting close to what you need for what they call p-value, statistical significance. If you don't have too many adverse events and you don't have too many different populations and variables, you can get to something that the FDA would say, we're seeing, significant differences between the vaccinated and unvaccinated group. We think we have something here. And if you do the adverse event analysis, it says I don't have so many adverse events. And it looks like it's kind of the same thing as happening with the vaccinated people with the saline solution. They have a little bit of arm pain as the people who actually got the vaccine, also a little bit of arm pain, nothing much more. Then you start to say, it seems pretty safe. An emergency use authorization is there to kind of test safe things in wider populations. So you could kind of stretch the emergency use authorization. It would be a huge stretch, frankly. As scientists, we don't really like to see this because it would be a very, very big stretch.
Well, I was gonna say last time you were on, I can't remember which vaccine it was, but was it yellow fever?
Yeah. So dengue fever has some issues. The Nile River fever vaccine.
Yeah. Okay.
Those have issues. But the idea here is there's a very big difference between injecting someone who's on their deathbed with a convalescent plasma that you've shown works in Ebola, and injecting a healthy human to see whether or not you have a vaccine shift. Right? There's a big difference there in terms of desperation of the patient, in terms of the ethics, in terms of the possible adverse events and how bad they could be. So I think it would be an abuse of the emergency use authorization, but I thought the dexamethasone was an abuse of emergency use authorization, and we had that happen, I think, with some pressure. And, so we have an election. I think we could actually get some suggestive evidence of some efficacy and the safety levels by about the end of October, which is sort of an interesting timing, right? That's right at the beginning of an election.
So Bob, maybe your prediction was right. This all goes away November 3rd.
I knew I was right.
Oh, sorry, November 4th. It all goes away.
Right.
It's the day after. Yeah.
That reminds me. And just on the math, we can go through it in detail if anyone has questions about how these. I'm an expert in study design, so I looked at that very carefully and was interested in chord set analyses and all sorts. And we can go into that if you want to. But basically, trust me, the math sort of works out that way. Unlike what Bob was suggesting, the truth is going to be that we're going to start taking off in November.
Story of my life.
We're going to have the first indications of exponential growth, right? So we have suggestive evidence of something that might be interesting and that might be having an impact on the virus. We have a presidential election, and all the senators, about a third of the senators, or whatever it is, and half the representatives are getting reelected. And we're having a takeoff of the virus, all happening at about this time. So it's going to be a pretty dramatic period.
Well, yeah, and and to add on to that, you've got. I think I saw today they were expecting basically a 10x increase in mail-in ballots. But you've got all the people waiting in line to vote. The actual polling stations are going to be. I've seen lines wrapped around buildings before. You add 6 feet social distancing to that, holy crap, this is going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, and a lot of people will have voted before they even know that the vaccine is possible, right? And so there'll be new information happening, and it's going to be challenging. And what's interesting is the U.S. already has in place all these deals for doses. They've already said, AstraZeneca, we want 300 million doses, and it's going to cost this much. J&J, 100 million doses on the first.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So all that's in place. So we got, and then the EUA comes in, and probably it'll be first healthcare and military workers, but I think, again, by about June, we'll have at-risk populations being eligible for vaccines, and we'll have enough of the vaccine basically available. Oh, I have the wrong slides up.
The next time Fred comes on, it's going to shoot up in November only if you vote for this candidate. See.
No, guys. I'm very able. I'm completely neutral.
I know you are. I'm being funny. I know you are.
But let me.
That's why we keep having you back. It's just about the science.
So
this presentation is paid for by the
the Political Action Committee in favor of. Yeah.
So let me go. I almost went to the wrong set of slides. I'm glad we caught that, because I want to show you what the supply chain looks like, because I think that'll be interesting for people to take a look at. Where'd that go? Oh,
See,
no.
Bob, he is just like us. He has name of presentation V2, V3, V3 edit Bob, V3, V4 Dave edit, V4.
That's how you're supposed to.
So that's one dimension of the sort of the drama of the whole thing. Then there's the whole global dimension, right?
Right.
China has already started this process, right? They're already out there in the market space. They're supplying Brazil. They're doing stuff starting in June. They don't have as good a technology as we do. They don't have as much testing as we do. They've already injected a lot of their military, so they have a lot more results, but they're not very good results. They have a lot of adverse events. Russia just launched Sputnik 5. They had 75. They just produced papers saying they've injected 76 people. So that's basically a phase 2 study. We're already midway through phase 3 studies on our side of the equation. So Here we have the US with probably what is likely to be the best technology with slightly more data being pressured by all this shift. And let's face it, we want to be the leader in the world in this space, right? I mean, if you start to control the best vaccines, you've got a lot of power in the political situation with other countries that want your vaccine, and we want to be in that position. If we kind of delay until the Russians and the Chinese basically build the market space, we may be at a little bit of a disadvantage.
Well, and the sad reality, and I think this quote that you've got at the top really speaks to it. Again, it gets back to, if you put something out that's not fully tested and it's not fully effective, and it's not even in your bullet points underneath it, you run the risk of making the damn thing stronger.
That's right. You do. Exactly right. Because you'll start to select. You'll start to select for the stronger viral strains that work against your vaccine, especially if it's only partially effective and you've got a lot of people living on the vaccine, living on in further generations. Also, of course, you're going to feel like, hey, I got vaccinated. I'm going to go out and do my stuff. I'm free now. I can do whatever I like. Well, if it's only a partially effective vaccine, you're going to have a bigger chance of getting infected. You're going to have to continue to use all this non-pharmaceutical intervention to prevent the spread, right? Then of course you're not going to be able to do phase 3 studies anymore, because you've got a choice of having a vaccine for sure for free. The U.S. government says it's going to be for free on the first round of doses, versus having a 50% chance of getting a vaccine or getting saline. You're going to take the 100% chance of getting a vaccine. So all those phase 3 trials are going to have to be done outside the United States. The other problem is that if you have a partially effective vaccine and you get it approved, the next vaccine has to be 10% better than that vaccine. And proving that a vaccine goes from 0 to 50 like we did in the first round, that's pretty easy. You only need 30,000 patients. If you want to prove that your vaccine is 10% better than a 50% vaccine, you got to test 100,000 people. So the separations get harder and harder, right? And then you have a risk of the fact that if you have partial vaccines, you might only be helping certain populations. And again, the asymmetries get really challenging. Who do you treat? Who don't you treat? So there's a lot of issues with partially effective vaccines that you approve very quickly. And
a question just came in from a viewer.
Yes.
Nick says, also, if attention pushes energies towards a single promising vaccine, could R&D of other potentials be backburnered?
Yes, we have it. So we've got 176 options right now. There are 176 vaccines in trials now, and there are really about 6 basic technologies spread among us 176. So Nick is absolutely right. What happens is if you focus everything on that first vaccine, you're ignoring a lot of the other vaccines, and that's what's so disappointing. Originally, what we wanted to do at the international levels, we wanted to have what they call a master protocol. For the master protocol, what happens is every vaccine is tested the same way. So you have all the vaccines lined up. So these are already phase 3 testing. Everyone uses the same methodology, and then you really see the difference between vaccine 1 and vaccine 2 using this master protocol technique. There are different statistical ways of doing this, but that's what you do basically. And you can actually compare each vaccine and their efficacy because they go around in cycles, right? We didn't do that. Now we have tribes of 5 or 6 guys who are in the lead, all vying for their own vaccine.
Well, yeah, because and I think you had talked about that last time around, where basically the first to market gets just the enormous percentage of the market share, and then it just drastically drops off after that.
Yeah, the first guy to market 60 is actually at 30, and that's the rest of the market tends to split 10% between them. Sadly, that's typical pharmaceuticals. And most of these guys the vaccines don't make very much money. So there are only about 6 manufacturers who do this well today. Most of the other companies basically, shed their vaccine operations a long time ago, because you're curing the disease. You don't make much money if you cure a disease. So here's my sense of how effective the first vaccine generation will be. My guess is it'll be what I call, quote unquote, 58% effective in reducing transmission, which is pretty good if it's true. But it'll only be 30% effective in preventing severe disease. I think it'll probably be good for about 80% of the population, but most likely the most jeopardized part of our population, the most susceptible part of our population, will be the 20% that we can't inject. The elderly, the young, the compromised. Those people will likely not be able to be vaccinated by more traditional broad vaccine. The durability, I think we'll be lucky if we get a year of durability. We'd like to have 3 years. The green indicates what we'd like. And scalability, I think we'll be at, CEPI's indicating we could be as many as 2 billion doses in a year. I think that's a little bit optimistic, but I don't want to disagree with CEPI because they have a lot of information that I don't. I'm only working with one of the big manufacturers, and they see the whole pipeline of 6 of them. So, they have more information. So
yeah, because that's the thing. So you've got 22% from the vaccine, 10% natural, so you've got 32%. We've got to hit like 60 to 70% to get to herd immunity, don't we?
at a minimum, yeah.
Yeah.
57% at an absolute minimum, yeah. And that probably when you get kind of at that rate if we consider an R of reproductive rate of that's 2.37, I think you guys get to 57%. Usually you want to have 80% just to make sure, because you can't intersperse the vulnerable with the unvulnerable. You got to have perfect, perfect
Right.
of safety. So basically, my sense is we'll be able to vaccinate about 85% of the population with a 58% of the effective overall. A 30% effective solution overall, which means we'll have about a 32% overall herd immunity on first round.
So just to make this, I guess, understandable, like how does that compare to, say, a flu shot?
Yeah, it's pretty comparable to a flu shot. We have about 40 to 60% of people taking the flu shot. It's usually about 50% effective, sometimes less.
You say 40 to 60, Fred?
Yeah, that's
that
awesome.
Many?
Yeah.
I would never have thought.
45%,
Honest to God.
45% of our average. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's.
That's the amount of people that vote.
That's
not
more
being
than the amount of
funny.
people that vote. That's the scary part.
I
Yeah.
know, that's
Yeah, so it'll be similar, the more partial it is, the more it's going to be more like a therapy that you kind of take continuously versus something that you take like a real vaccine you take once a year and the problem solved. Now,
I guess that's a better analogy. So it's more comparable to, say, a flu shot than it is to, say, a measles vaccine.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the case. If it's like a measles vaccine, then we would have hit the lottery, right? 100% immunity for as long as you like.
Right.
That's the lottery, and that's the bet on the silver bullet, and maybe we'll be lucky. But I think this is more likely. So if that's the case, you want to be able to mix your drugs plus your vaccines plus all your NPI and do it well. And we're not doing well with NPI, so chances are we're not going to have as good an effect of the vaccine as people think right now, sadly. And we might push it, and then we'll have a mediocre vaccine for a long time instead of a good one. A little bit longer if we wait a little bit more longer. But we'll see. We have to look at the data, and it's not there yet. So the supply chains are really interesting here. Like I said, we are having a lot of trouble with our supply chains because we haven't changed them. You'd think that we have a brand new virus, we need to have a brand new supply chain, right? No. We're going to just try to tweak what we currently have in place, and the result is we have all sorts of issues and bottlenecks that we cannot possibly solve if you look at the kind of gap we have in most of these supply chains. And that's what's really hurting us in our NPI. So you can see our hygiene, we're probably a 10x off on hygiene. We don't have enough spray pump bottles.
That's the thing. I've heard that from probably every, restaurant, bar, whatever owner that I know, that, okay, yeah, this week we can get the sanitizer, but we can't get pumps. They're on back order for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Or, hey, great, I found somebody for pumps, but now all the sanitizers like screwed and we can't do anything for 4 weeks.
Yeah, and we're sort of minus, like you said, I think we're kind of at a minus 40% capability and an overall 10 times supply chain gap because, that magnifies itself all the way back to the raw materials, right? The same thing is true about PPE. We've got a 50 times supply chain gap. We don't have enough of the pressed fiber, and that kind of magnifies itself all the way along the supply chain from the raw material to the distributor. We don't have enough testing and tracing at all the way along, and that's what's really hurting us. And then, of course, our repurposed pharma drugs, we don't have any of the API production. We only have about 50% of our production is in the United States for drugs generally, and almost all those are most expensive drugs, now are repurposed drugs that have been on the market for a long time and proven safe for a broad population like what we need. Well, let's take a look at the future vaccine population. Supply chain. this is what it looks like. Right now, we're able to actually produce 287 million doses in the United States. That means all the flu, all the pneumonia, all the diphtheria, all the MMR.
So that's what we do in total for everything that we currently have going on. That's
everything we got going. 287 million doses in a year. That's as much as we can do. Now, we might be able to eke out about 10, 15% more, according to the studies we've done. That means we have 35 million doses that we have available right now. And now we have to use that supply chain in order to...
So if we wiped out all of that and repurposed it, we would have 10% of the population covered.
Oh, not even, right?
Yeah.
Because the number that we actually need is 10 billion. So we got 35 billion, we need 10 billion doses. Right, for the global demand. Now for the United States, we only need 500 million, so we're only a factor of 20 off there. But I mean, it's it's the gap.
I'm just going to agree. I think it was Michael Good that posted earlier on the video, and he was like, "Okay, well, back to the bunker."
That's good.
So and then all these supply chains are completely uncoordinated, right? They got 4 different competitors initially, and then you've got to figure out how the adjuvants get involved, how the injectors get in, and how the glass and the stoppers all get in. And you're sitting there going, because I'm actually having to try to figure some of this stuff out. And you got a pretty slow moving oligopoly that, sort of is pretty happy, highly regulated, and sort of moving along, chug, and making some money here and there with some vaccines. And the manufacturing, I can't emphasize how complicated the manufacturing is. Some of these drugs have over 1,000 components in them, literally. I mean, it's very complicated, super highly regulated, super constrained, right? Some of the adjuvants, I'm working with one adjuvant. I need 10 pounds of it. It's going to take me 2 years and cost $1.4 billion just for that one component.
Wow.
If you do
the wrong business.
Yeah. There are other adjuvants that come, there's a stamen of a flower in Malaysia that only grows once every 30. I mean, literally, it's sort of at this rate. It's incredible. But you need that, 1/100th of a microgram in every 1,000 doses in order to stimulate the immune system properly. It's wild. So at any rate, it's sort of black magic, and it all comes together. I'm overemphasizing slightly, but it's literally some of these examples are true. The transport management, half of the doses are going to have to go through a minus 80 degrees centigrade cold chain. We don't have that available everywhere in the United States. Minus 80 is deep freeze. Right? And we have minus 20, but minus 80, that's a lot harder to get to, and it takes a lot more energy, obviously, a lot more dry ice, a lot more weight, a lot more echo containers. These are, this is hard. And then we have a lot of political allocation. Just to make it a little bit more interesting, we don't manage this by supply and demand and how much people are willing to pay. We're going to manage this with the CDC having a special algorithm that's actually going to say this, and this population are prioritized, and therefore Massachusetts, therefore Michigan, you're going to get, here are your doses, and we'll drop them off in Lansing, and you're responsible for distributing them to the people out there who are supposed to be assigned by priority. So it is going to be a wild time.
Hey, Fred.
Yeah.
Bill just asked if China's going to hold back on any of the ingredients or any of the drugs, or are they being, I guess, cooperative with all of us? I guess that's a great question.
So far, so good. But remember, we're just scaling up. We can handle 35 million doses, which is enough for our clinical trials easily. And then the first probably round of the military injections possibly, or the healthcare injections, but that's it. After that, we're going to feel a real pinch. And I think part of the reason that people are starting to try to, now I don't want to spread, rumor, so I better not say that. But there's some hacking that's going on, and there may be a reason for that hacking. I'll just say that. So here's what's interesting is here's the different pieces. But I think that by 6/21, when this gets available for the general public, we get general licensure right through a normal process. So you and I won't have access to these initial drugs that are going through and being EUA. It'll be the people who are prioritizing special healthcare workers and some of the military. When it gets available to the general public, here's sort of the supply.
Well, and again, this is all wholly dependent on everything going right. Like I just want to make sure we keep stressing that.
This says that we will continue to be, hitting it out of the park on every dimension of clinical development, which we've been doing so far. I'm shocked, but we haven't had any big screw ups. And that's remarkable because this is a brand new virus with brand new requirements, and we're getting pretty good results. and we're hitting all our timelines. And I'm just watching this going, wow, this is really great. You know, if it keeps going like that, this is sort of what it's going to look like if we keep hitting our timeline. So, and you can get a sense of the EUA is going to then be available for the general public around, it's 400 million doses. It'll probably be less than that because we have a logarithmic scale up and there'll be all sorts of hiccups, I think. So, but there'll be at least 100 million doses available for the general public in 621, I think. Of these
So, you know, just in time for school to be out and, you know, yeah.
So the challenge, though, is get this. It's not just the active ingredient. You've got to drag along all these injectors and all these needles and all the glass. Now, it turns out...
And you're back to supply chain issues, yep.
Yeah, you know where we get a lot of this glass from? You're not going to... This glass is special borosilicate glass. It doesn't react to the vials and is, you know, perfectly... You know, is just a perfect glass for vaccines, and it's quite rare. And we're actually looking for glass under the glaciers of Greenland because it actually is profitable to mine sand if it's the proper composition out of Greenland, transported here to the two manufacturers who can do something with it to create medical grade.
That's
otherwise.
I don't even know how to process that. That's crazy.
Is it time to have your grandma surrender all her vintage Pyrex? Because that's all made from borosilicate.
That's right. The injectors are just as bad too, right? Because it isn't just, you know, unless you want to be poked with an old-fashioned needle without real surgical steel and really, you know, big hole in it. I mean, these new injectors, that steel. I mean, I worked on this stuff for several years. You got to have special surgical level steel. It's got to be, you know, grounded. We've got 31 different facets of the needle to really, you know, improve its injectability and resistance through the skin. You want to have the right stuff. We're super constrained on the steel that's coming through, and basically there's one big manufacturer, Beckman Dickinson, does all that for us. And if they can't get access to the steel, which is coming largely from other countries, sadly, you know, we're going to have the same kind of constraint. Now, I think these are solvable problems, but I only have 6-7 months, and that's what makes it tough. And the problem is that these injectors, needles, glass, stoppers, everybody else wants them too. The Russians want them, the Chinese want them, the Germans want them.
Right.
And so this is a global issue, and some of these things are really hard to get. Like, for example, in order to test whether I've got bacterial contamination in the vial, you actually use the blood of the. This will sound strange, but you use the blood of the limulus, which is this horseshoe crab. Now there are not that many limuli on the planet, so we've actually got a new synthetic method that we think is going to work. But we got, you know, we've got to scale it and get it in production. That's the sort of stuff we're looking at.
So what you're saying is go out and start a horseshoe crab farm. is what I'm hearing. That's
now. We think but it's, you know, we're still scaling that baby up. So in addition to all that, we're getting, you know, 2 billion more doses from Novavax and Sanofi coming on stream. Again, 2 new supply chains, 2 new manufacturers, 2 new, you know, so this complexity is quite challenging to manage. It is all I'm trying to say. And then the last issue you've got is, do you want to just treat the U.S. or do you want to treat the whole world? You know, so that's going to be a big question. And people have kind of said, it's sort of like, you know, airplane masks. You get in trouble, you want to have the mask and the vaccine pop down and everyone gets their breath. You take care of yourself first, then you worry about the guy next to you, right? Well, suppose that only the first class airline masks drop, or only a couple will drop here and there. And then you sort of wonder, is this the right solution to the problem we've got? And although it's counterintuitive, generally, the faster you kill the pandemic, the better off the whole world is, and the better off you do as a nation, you know, in that world. We are a very small sliver of the overall world demand. So the problem is that we would divert a lot of our capacity over to the other parts of the world. But statistically, it would actually be faster to let the vulnerable people around the world, with a slight preference to ours, be vaccinated with us. Because otherwise it's going to happen if you have this is only true for a partially effective vaccine. If you have a fully effective vaccine in the first round, you want to inject it, cure all your own citizens, and then move out. But if you've got a partially effective vaccine, the problem is going to come back around and bite you again and again and again, because there'll be reservoirs of this active virus all over the world trying to get you. and we'll also have pissed off all of our friends around the world because we will.
Well, and I mean, it gets back to, I mean, that gets back to how this all started in the first place. I mean,
That's right.
okay, everything's great. Everybody start traveling again. Oops.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what's likely to happen. And the other thing that's likely to happen is that we're not going to have the only vaccine. There'll be vaccines that might be better for parts of our population that we should be giving, for example, to certain Russians, because the Russians will be doing better that way, and the Russians will have vaccines better for parts of our population. But if we don't say no, if we say no, that's all ours, then we won't be able to share and find the best solution for the world. So it turns out, counterintuitively, that, and difficult politically, that it is smarter to play a global game than us first game for a whole number of reasons, if we have a partially effective vaccine, which is likely through the first 18 months of this cycle. So at any rate, the next part of this discussion is about the economy. And I've taken a lot of time. Do you want me to go a little bit talk about the economy, or do you want to call it a night? What would you like?
Yeah, no, I think this is the part that people are actually going to be really, really interested in is what's going on.
Okay. Well, there's two parts of the economy. One's the microeconomy, one's the macroeconomy, right? So on the micro side of the economy, what you want to look for if you're a business is you want to look at how easy it is to socially distance. Is it easy or difficult? And then how important are you to the overall economy in terms of curing COVID? And if you are in the lower left-hand corner, right, where it's difficult to socially distance, everyone's working together tightly and breathing on each other and coughing on each other, and you're not very important to the fight against COVID, then you're going to have to either mothball yourself until we find a solution, which will be 2 to 5 or even 10 years away, or you want to reinvent yourself. So, and these kinds of businesses are, sadly, the big service industries we got, right? The bars and things like that. We'll get into the type of industry we're talking about in a second. Now, if you are easy to social distance, but you're not very important, then you're not terribly important to the overall discussion, and you can just do what you like in the free market environment. If you're in the upper right-hand corner, you've got a good, right? Because it's easy for you to socially distance, and you're really important to the effort, so you can raise your price and be really relevant in the overall economy. So you want to be in that upper right-hand corner. That's a great place to be. The upper left-hand corner is actually the most difficult because you're very important, but you can't socially distance. And those are the guys those are the manufacturing operations, those are the school teachers, and those are the guys that are really having trouble. So let's take a look at this a little bit. What's interesting, everyone wants to get into the upper right-hand corner, and Jeff Bezos on day 2 figured this out. What he did is he said, from now on, everyone who goes to any outlets that we've got, and they bought that supermarket, I forgot, Whole Foods, right? They bought Whole Foods. They said, we're shutting down Whole Foods. You want to come to Whole Foods? We'll deliver. You go on the internet, tell us what you want. We'll put it on the front porch, and good luck with that. But everything else is going to be delivered everyone's front porch, and we're going to focus on essential stuff that's important to COVID. He literally said that on day 2, and so you watched his performance in the economy, and it's just exploded, right? He's doing brilliantly.
Well, yeah, and I think Amazon. I mean, you saw that with I mean, they focused at what their website. It wasn't just Whole Foods. Right. It was Amazon in general was. Yep, we're focusing on all of the the critical issues and the critical items that people need. Everything else. Yep. Hey, sorry about your shipment times. It is what it is.
And so he's been outperforming the marketplace by, I think he's grown 160% since COVID. I mean, literally that. So and that's the sort of thing you want to do as a business owner, as an employee, and the kind of jobs you want to look for in the future. So that's the framework. Now let's take a look at each of those quadrants in a little bit more detail. This is the worst place to be. This is when you can't socially distance very easily, and you're not very important to the overall COVID economy, right? So travel and tourism, I mean, airline travel is down 45, 55%. And it's not going to come back till we have a solution. Hospitality, you can't get, hotels are 45% capacity. They were at the bottom at 85% negative capacity, right? The theater, the music events, the sports, all that stuff is having a lot of trouble coming back. Health and beauty services, the fitness clubs we just talked about, they're the last to open back up again.
Right.
Right. So that's sort of in that quadrant. And the best move you've got is to digitalize and virtualize, right? So the fitness studios, you see a lot of stuff online now,
yep.
People working out online, all that stuff. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be back in the,
Well, and I mean, even, so like, and that's, I guess that's, bars and restaurants went to, pick up and carry out and everything else. And I think travel and tourism, not a whole lot you can do there. Same thing with the performing arts. Like you can't, there's a lot of people that have gone to, there's been a lot of like online concerts and that kind of stuff, people performing from, their houses, or even like you'll see an entire band get together from their different locations and do their thing online. And that's great, but that's still not, 30,000 people, 60,000 people in an arena at a concert, at, $50 to $500 a piece. And I mean, it's rough. I mean, I know a lot of friends that are in the plan shows and run shows and work shows, and it's death on a stick to them.
And I think it's we got another 2 years of this at least, sadly, because we saw the vaccine, if everything works perfectly, we got a vaccine. It's going to be a couple of years at least before we get that back, because there's a difference between a vaccine and a vaccination, right? The vaccine means we can get there in June. Vaccination means you got to have all the needles, all the shots, everyone gets shot twice. I mean, that takes a lot longer. That's 2 to 3 years out. So the other thing you can do is try to become essential. And so a lot of non-essential bricks and mortars are trying to become more important in what they're producing. They're moving from, producing, less important things to more important things. So that's sort of that quadrant. And I think about half of the businesses are going to go out of business in that space if we don't solve this problem fast, which is terrible, because I have a lot of friends in the space, and I have a lot of restaurants I like. I'm trying to do the best I can to give them business and stuff, but it's just rough for them. The next area is the area where it's pretty easy to socially distance, but it's not terribly important to the overall fighting COVID. And that's things like farming. You can socially distance there, but it's pretty important. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty important overall, but they're going to have some challenges. And oil and gas is another big area that's challenged. And the reason these guys are challenged is because it's not that they're that important. It's just that the rest of the economy is just suffering, and so they're falling down with the rest of the economy. The rest of the economy's got a little nosebleed, and with oil and gas, you've got a hemorrhage going on.
Well, if you've got nobody driving to work, they don't need to fill up their tank twice a week, and you don't need,
yeah, that's the problem. Distribution, I think it's going to increase slightly, but it depends on what kind of distribution you're in. Medical supply distribution, good. Distribution of stuff that's less important, not so good. And the same thing with brick and mortar retail. Again, here the best thing you can do is focus on the digital customer experience or become more essential. And I think this is going to become like a free market. There's going to be lots of consolidation in this space, lots of M&A going on. If you have access to capital and you have access to information networks and technologies, and you're good at that, you'll thrive, and you'll hurt because you can outcompete your competition. That's sort of what it looks like. Then we've got the good spot. This is the great spot. You really want to be in this spot if you can. This is people who can distance and do great, right? We can work remotely. We can talk like this. Everything's wonderful. We can still get the same proximate effect. Engineering firms, IT firms, software firms, financial services firms, to some extent, professional services firms, if they're not directly, if they can work remotely, you put everyone on their home computers and they work, and they're pretty much as effective and efficient as before by not coming into the office. And your cost structure goes down. Your sales are through the roof. So this is a very good place to be, and you want to expand to digital platforms that control more and more parts of the economy, like Amazon is doing right now, like Microsoft is doing, like Netflix is doing, right? You just move into, and then you start to expand geographically from the US base. That's where we're trying to stop the Chinese from doing this, because we want to do it ourselves. So that's what you want to do in this space, and lots of opportunity. Now, the last area is the hardest one. And it's the one we have a lot of the questions for society we've got to answer. And here the problem is that essential manufacturing, I think we're going to learn how to, and I'm working with a lot of these guys, so I think they're going to learn how to socially separate. I think they have great new SOPs to protect their workers. I think they're going to have new ventilation systems, new testing systems. That's all going to come into place. The essential manufacturers will then become easier to socially distance and safely social distance, and they're going to be okay. Which leaves us with these three areas: public services, education, and healthcare. These are big parts of our economy that are really going to suffer disproportionately, and that people really rely on, who are suffering also, right? The healthcare, people who are sick, people who are poor, are going to disproportionately need to have the healthcare with COVID. People who need more public services, people who really need education. These are the areas that as a society we're going to have to say, these are so important, we're willing to pay a few more taxes, or we're willing to pay a little bit more to keep them in place. because there's only there's a lot of pressure to basically privatize, right? Privatize.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the reality with like schools. Like,
Yeah.
that's the one that I hear about a lot.
Everything goes charter, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, just because of I have friends that are teachers and friends that are that are in that realm, and there are some school districts that hadn't before. Because like the school district I live in, like for years now, every kid gets an iPad and yada yada, and off you go. There are some school districts that had not done that yet. And so they got caught, okay, crap. Now it's something we have to deal with, and we have to figure that out very, very rapidly. Is it a millage we can figure out? Is it this we can figure out? Like, how do we make this work? And how do we get this in the budget that we didn't know we needed right now? And you've got a lot of nonprofits and community organizations that have come along and said, okay, we're going to raise money and get, laptops or tablets or whatever for the kids, but then, oh, by the way, you've got to make sure they've got something to connect to when they get home, when they're sitting there in their house. Otherwise, all this distance learning doesn't mean jack.
And if you have 3 kids, you need 3 of it, right? And
yep.
All of a sudden it just escalates, and you go, oh my God, how am I going to do all this? And there's some courses that are asking for extra fees if you take your child, because you need to work, to a facility that is centralized,
yep.
that all the kids, and you have to pay extra money for that. And it's like, oh my gosh. So there's a lot of stress on privatization, but we can't privatize everything that quickly either. And it's not necessarily a good solution, frankly, in many cases. So, this group is something we have to figure out as a society about what our values really are. And it's going to be challenging if we have a long-term impact of COVID. So now.
Well, and so, sorry, but the one thing you've got, so like healthcare, like one of the big things that I've seen a lot of complaints about this, especially over the last 6 months, is one of the things this has really shown to us is that is it real? Like, should we really be calling that industry healthcare?
Yeah.
Because it's like, hospitals aren't really set up for healthcare. They're set up for for-profit operations. They're set up for the elective surgeries and the churn and burn and getting people through. And that when a pandemic like this hits, that's not what they're there for. They're not ready for it.
It exposes the weaknesses.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's going to be a big question in the future. I work in the space, and for a long time I worked in Europe. I worked 20 years in Europe. I worked 20 years here. And there's positives and negatives about having for-profit healthcare and having healthcare provided as a right. And the positives are, in the United States, is we probably have the very best heroic healthcare in the world, right? I mean, if you've got a strange disease, you want to be here. That only one surgeon in the world has expertise with. You'll find that guy here. But on the other hand, if you're trying to do general chronic disease and life expectancy improvements and slow continual improvement work, then you want to have something where healthcare is a right and everyone has equal access to it. So I think we're going to have some challenges resolving some of this, frankly.
I think that's putting it mildly, yeah.
But it's going to focus the question, that's for sure. So we talked a lot about, that's the micro environment, right? So that's microeconomics, what happens in the business, what you're at in your business. Now I want to talk a little bit about macroeconomics, and I did some work for the World Bank back in the day. This is all about modeling as well. And what I try to do is I try to take my epidemiologic models and apply them on the biology side and apply them to the economics. And very few people do this because they don't have all the data, they don't have all the expertise. But I have a little bit of a broader capability, an educational basis to do this. So I try to do this. So let's take a look at the different models. One is get lucky, that's the bet. And here, the biological model is basically you get an effective vaccine and you cure the problem. And the best move you got, if you're working on if you're saying, I'm going to throw it all on the lottery, the best thing you can do to avoid permanent economic damage is to tell everybody, everything's great. Keep working like you normally would, because we're going to have
all is well.
All is well. Because you want to have everyone confident, right? You don't want to have the whole demand curve go down and have to prop it up after the bet pays off. You want to have the demand curve up here saying everything's great, keep going on with your normal life, and everything's fabulous. And you want to open as fast as you can. You close it down once, fine, but after that, you open it and you leave it open, and you open up as fast as you can. So if you think about that, the United States is executing at the federal level perfectly, right? And we are going after this get lucky.
According to this strategy, they're doing exactly what they should be doing.
They're on it. Unfortunately, we think it's probably going to cost us about 500,000 U.S. deaths until we get full control with the vaccine, and it's probably going to sadly be more than that. The second part of this is the marathon, right? We have discipline, where it takes a long time, and you try to avoid the exponential growth. You build, detect, and control healthcare infrastructure. You encourage healthy behaviors. You create societal norms. You've got ways of processes of doing things. Everyone comes together as a collective group, and here we have partially effective controls. And if you do it right, even though it takes you a lot longer than having to shoot for a silver bullet, maybe it's 650,000 deaths, but you aren't betting the whole farm, because if you miss the get lucky bet, chances are you're going to move to what they call a brutal model. And the brutal model means you wait for the next vaccine, and you double down on the next vaccine, you double down on the next vaccine after that, and double on that again. And before you know it, you've got runaway problems with you're
sitting at the table on a losing streak and you refuse to leave the table.
That's it. And you keep again. Let's double down again. Oh, there's the next vaccine. It's going to hit the one to hit.
Oh, no, I'm due for a hot streak. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Everything's going to be good. I just have to hit once, right? I'm good. What's happened in the meantime is, of course, your wife's selling your car in order to pay. You're in a big problem. you got big credit card debts and things are blowing up behind you while you're having a great time at the table. And this is kind of what I call haphazard decimation is sort of the model, because you're going to have people kind of randomly getting killed all over the place because you've got runaway virus. You're going to have explosions of problems all over the place. The economy will be L-shaped downward, which is not a good place to be. And you probably get about 2.2 million deaths. So you're betting at all, and you could be moving to a very unhappy situation. And the best move you've got, if you're in that space, is to survive, right? If you survive, it turns out if you survive.
God, I feel like I'm reading like the plot line for The Walking Dead on this. Like,
yeah, it is what I'm telling you, because you want to survive, and that way, it turns out if you survived the Spanish flu, where 650,000 Americans died, you were one of the last survivors, and you had, you were out there building the new economy, right? You did pretty well, and so you want to build
just in time for the Great Depression to hit. Yeah, that was great.
Exactly. A little bit the wrong way. Yeah, exactly. So you want to encourage opportunism, right? You want to have extreme social distancing during outbreaks if you're at risk. You want to save yourself, but after that, you're out, you're home free, and you wait for the next one, and you kind of build what you can when you can. So that's what's happening biologically. Now let's take a look at what's happening economically at the macro scale. So what you do is, in order to model this, what you do is you sort of say, here are all the positive factors, right? You've got, the green are the positive factors. So employment, until we had the shutdown, we had employment going up, had tax rates, improving, getting better, which they weren't going up, they were actually improving, they were going down. Interest rates were going down. And at the same time, though, the economy wasn't perfect. We had slowing capital growth and corporate growth. We had the money velocity was slowing down. We had our global debt levels continuing to go up because of because of our big tax break. But overall, good stuff, right? I mean, we were hitting on lots of cylinders. Then we had the shutdown, and now there's a whole new series of negative things and a whole new series of positive things that you've got to model to see what happens. And so that's what my model does, is it sort of thinks about these things as positive and negative. But the problem is behind all this is the biology, right? Because it turns out that if the virus mutates and all of a sudden you've got a much more virulent virus that's killing off, at 5 times the level, it doesn't matter what you do with interest rates. Your economic model is going to go to hell, even though the interest rates are going to negative rates and so on, because the biology is so bad that your productivity is affected. So the biology drives the healthcare. I'm sorry, and the healthcare then sadly drives the economy. So we said we shut down. The truth is, it shut us down. We couldn't have survived going through not shutting down. We would have killed off too many people. So that's what's happening here. But don't forget, in the background of all this, the economic models are overwhelmed by the magnitude of the variable uncertainties in the COVID modeling. But once you hold those things constant, you can then get a pretty good sense of what's going to happen economically. The other big problem we have is this is a novel virus, and we're talking about using pretty standard old economic kinds of tools, right? So we've got a novel biology that's driving this whole thing. At the same time, we're trying to use standard economic recovery tools. So the tools aren't right for what the problem is we're trying to solve. And that's
Right.
going to happen over and over again. So here we are. And basically what we're predicting is what they call a square root function with a slow recovery, right?
Okay.
You see that going up and then coming way down and then coming back and starting to flatten out and slow recovery. And the get lucky, you can see here, we're getting, we actually recover at about the middle of 2023, 24, when people are largely hitting herd immunity and we're back on track.
So even winning the
The best
lottery,
scenario.
best case scenario, we're still looking at wow. Okay.
Oh yeah. Oh, at least, so that's a good scenario, right? Because it takes some time to.
Fred, this is why I drink while you're on our show. I love you, man, but damn.
So this is almost a V. In the larger.
Oh, it's far better than the alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the marathon, you can see we're talking kind of about 25 and a half. So 5.5 years out, when we finally start to gain control of this, it takes 45. So you can see basically the key question is, when does things return to normal? And that's the duration of NPI dependency.
Right.
How long we are dependent on this non-pharmaceutical stuff, and when the pharmaceuticals finally kick in. So the pharmaceuticals will finally kick in about 40 months, 4 years out, and it'll take us about 18 months beyond that in order to finally get everybody injected and get everybody better and on track and back to herd, what I call herd immunity. And then the problem is this brutal strategy, because in the brutal strategy, what happens is it looks better economically in the short term, right? Because you're not investing in any healthcare and anything that defies your economy. You're full on letting everything run at full open and ignoring the fact you're having a lot of healthcare problems. Well, unfortunately, eventually the healthcare problems come back to bite you, and that costs an awful lot of money to get back on track. And so you can start to see that we go back and forth, and in the first year and a half, you actually overall, it's one of the better scenarios. And then after that, the truth starts to hit you, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is killing us and hurting us a lot economically, because people are unwilling to participate in the economy. You can open up all you like, but if people think they're going to die because they get on a jet plane for 9 hours, they're not going to get on that jet plane. They're not going to help you economically.
Well, yeah, I mean, same thing with movie theaters and all that kind of stuff.
Same thing, right?
Hey,
yeah, I'd love to see Tenet. It's just that I don't want to be in a place with 300 other people who are breathing, coughing, and cheering for the next 3 hours.
Yeah.
In a closed environment with no fans. That's love the movie, but let's wait for Netflix, right? So you won't participate economically under those circumstances, unfortunately. So that's why brutal costs so much. So at any rate, so here's what I think is likely to happen, and I think there's the lucky scenario pays off. I think again we have about a 20% chance of that happening. We have a pretty effective vaccine, and lucky pays off. And what we're going to want to do is evaluate our bet kind of from 2021 through 2022 and a half.
So okay, so I just want to make sure I caught that right. So 20%.
Yeah, about 1 in 5 chance.
So would you bet the mortgage on 20%? I guess that's my question.
And then there's a spectrum of what could happen beyond that, right? There's so then the vaccine will be partially effective.
Right.
How partial is that, and how much difficulty is it going to change? Well, chances are that you'll move to a brutal scenario if you don't manage it well, and you'll be out in the 2027, 2028 with a lot of expenses. And that's probably with a 30 to 50% effective annual vaccine. So what you want to do is you want to hope that lucky pays off, because we already got the bet placed, right? We're on the pathway here to let that.
Yeah, right. The train's already left the station. This is where we are. Yeah,
we're in full, right? We got a full unhedged bet, and we're going for it. But if that doesn't happen, you want to start hedging. You want to start investing I think it's going to be $1.5 trillion in investment, and that's your anti-brutal insurance policy, and that's what I think is your best option right now, because it's important that you understand just how big this impact is. So if we look at the recovery scenarios, and what we did here is I added up all of the recessions that we've had since World War II. And as you add up every recession in terms of the depth of the GDP sinkage and the length of time it took to get out of the GDP sinkage and the employment impact, you combine all that together, and it turns out you've got to add every recession that we've ever had since the end of World War II to get to the same kind of thing we're facing right now. And that's because
I'm going to grab a shot.
That's because this isn't a normal economic recession, right?
Right.
This is a biologically contrived recession that we're responding to, and we're not doing it very effectively because we haven't done it before. And so we're still learning, and it's going to take us a lot longer. And the impacts are a lot more felt to the economy than we're used to. Now, luckily, we responded quite effectively so far. But if Congress lets us down, it's going to be a bad scene.
Well, and I think you like one of the comparisons you've got there is the the .com recession, and okay, so for that, yeah, we had a it's a cause and effect thing. We made a lot of risky moves. People did a lot of dumb stuff. Let's go ahead and put some protections in place to keep that from ever happening again, and let's get back on our feet and move forward.
And it was a 0.8% reduction in GDP.
Yep.
And it took state to get out of it. That was it.
Yeah, and so but now you've got this wildly unknown and uncontrollable, thus far, variable of, well, yes and no. I mean, because again, yes, there are things we can do to make it better. Yes, there are things we can do to mitigate it, but it's not like we can pass legislation to make COVID go away, to stop banks from, doing risky loans, and to stop people from, falsifying documentation, that kind of stuff. This is something completely different.
Exactly. And so this is what we're facing. And so, it's just so people should understand, like our supply chains look like they're 50 times off. This is why we're 50 times off, is because we have to make such a huge shift so quickly that we're not able to respond.
Right.
On the economic side of all supply chains, or now on the macro side, probably also because our Congress just can't, work that fast to pump money into the economy that fast. They're not used to it. So at any rate, now the issue will be that as we continue to try to make that double down bet, and every time we sort of say, we want to bet on this vaccine that was discovered in, Sri Lanka.
By the way, I like the version of this graph where it's actually the old school game of Minesweeper.
Oh,
I'll have to shoot you a copy so you can pull it into this, because I feel like that's a much better graph for this.
I'd love to have it. I'd love to have it. That's right, because we're doubling down each time. And what's happening is you're taking the very best chance for the whole world, and you're saying, that's mine. I'm going to pay you enough money that you give it all to me so I can place my next bet. Well, if you're Germany watching this, the first time it happened, you say, well, we have our own thing and maybe it'll be all right. But if it happens like every time, and every time Germany's out of the money, they're going to say, wait a minute, I don't like this betting business anymore, especially so if you keep making this bet that keeps everybody else out of the upside and controls all of your upside. It might be good for you a couple times, but if you keep losing that bet and people see your game, then eventually people are going to stop playing with you. They're going to say,
well, I mean, eventually the bookie's going to cut you off, because I mean that's just reality. Yeah.
Right, and pretty soon all of your economic linkages are going to atrophy. You can't travel anymore. You're going to be sort of persona non grata. And when I think about
which we basically are right now, which is what this shows.
Yeah, and which is what this shows. Because I also have a Swiss citizenship. Full disclosure, we're a very free market economy. We got a for-profit health system in Switzerland, but I can travel anywhere I want in the world right now under my Swiss passport. And this is where I can travel with my U.S. passport. I can go to the Caribbean. I can see parts of Croatia and Tanzania and Cambodia, and parts of the Middle East, and that's it. That's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
A couple versus 6 months ago. And you don't want this to happen because if I think about my being American businessman, you come in with a level of credibility and privilege that no other businessman in the world has, right?
And a certain level of ego that goes along with that.
Yeah, you can come in with a swagger. You come in knowing you've got the world's greatest economy behind you, the world's greatest economic powerhouse behind you, the best money in the world,
Right.
period. But so you have that cachet coming into every business deal that you're working on globally. That privilege, that competitive advantage is going to be taken away. And I guess that's probably worth about 20% of all of our businesses in the United States. So think about all that of that as China starts to move in on that extra cachet, as
Right.
other countries start to move in on that, and that's what you want to prevent by constantly taking bets and losing the bet. If you win the bet, everything comes back, and congratulations, welcome back to the world community. Can we please have one of your vaccines, please? But if
Right.
you miss the bet, it gets bad fast. So my thought is we probably want to place this bet 6 or 7 times max, and you probably want to do it for about a year max. And after that, you better start playing a different game, because you're eventually, as you said, the book is going to take it away. And as Einstein said, if you keep playing the same game and expecting it,
Yeah, you know what? Maybe roulette is not for you. Maybe slot machines. Like maybe stick with the quarter slots and you're good. Yeah.
And move to a different strategy.
Yeah.
So my thought is you probably want to avoid the brutal strategy, and you probably want to have some insurance. And by doing that, you invest in at least the bet plus a hedge, and the hedge looks a
So
little.
now okay, I was just going to say, what does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So the hedge says we invest in disruptive technology, we invest in the world's best testing, we try to do the best tracing, we continue working on vaccines, we look at medicine cocktails. Right, so we place more bets in more disruptive technologies that actually could address the difference that we have in fighting this versus the rest versus what we've done in the past. We then work on the supply chains, and so we understand what the total supply looks like, and we work on all levels. So we know what the total supply is and the total demand is through the whole supply chain. We've got global backstops. We have deals with countries that still like us. And we have a hospital infrastructure that doesn't expose the fact we've got a lot of people who are very, very ill in process in the hospital. As the population sees that and the hospital infrastructure gets overwhelmed, you get a lot of high death rate, and then you have people who are obviously the population gets very upset. You support demand. That means you continue with all of the social insurance, because if people can't spend money and they start to save a lot, in order to, as they see the economy starting to shrink, it's a downward cycle, because you have to restore that demand. You actually get permanent structural changes and problems in the economy that you can't overcome. The Fed has to continue. The regulatory emergencies have to continue. The school, child care, remote infrastructure has to continue, and you have to make sure that you don't completely shift societal, balance of powers, like we're starting to see a little bit, sadly, in the minority, poor, and elderly populations that are being by really hurt much more than the rest of us in society. If you don't do that, you pay a really big price coming back on this, because you live in an unbalanced society, and eventually things start to crack, and that costs money. So this is what I think our best chance of coming out of this is: less scathed, using the lucky strategy. So the forecast is, negative growth. Unfortunately, nothing good comes from the economy from this, and we're going to have a shock. I think we're going to kind of get back up to 88 to 91% of pre-pandemic levels, and then we'll kind of drift upwards very slowly, unless we have to shut down, which may happen in early next year.
Yeah, that was kind of my question: is with everything starting to open up again, like what's kind of your gut feel on are we going to be locking back down again?
So it was interesting. The epidemiologists all got about 170 of them got together and said, if we were all alone in the world, there were no politics, what would we do? And the answer for the guys who were on the field were, we'd shut this thing down again and really hit it hard. But politically, that was impossible, right? We're coming up to a political election. So I think that'll, if the politics change slightly and there's new mandates that are set up as a result of elections, there is a chance we could have a shutdown in February. I don't know if it would be the same level of shutdown, but it would be I think a pretty drastic one if we're getting we're trying to move from 5,000 to 6,000 deaths a day back down to and 1,000. That's a less than even 100. That was what we need to get for about 2 weeks. That's a long.
Yeah.
So More constraints on direct service businesses are going to limit productivity. Rising inequality is going to hurt political stability. That's easy to predict. We're seeing that already. Consumer spending and competitiveness of businesses on a worldwide basis, which we talked a little bit about. COVID issues are asymmetric. They have been worse. The consequences have been worse for the most vulnerable, and that will continue, sadly. For the privileged, it's going to be sort of, why can't we have the spice of life? Why can't we go to the bars? Why can't we have that special, island retreat?
Well, and the sad reality is why can't we go to bars and restaurants? Like, people don't even view that as privilege. Like, you don't even realize how good we have it day to day.
I know. Why can't I get the 50-yard line seats?
Yeah.
Damn, why can't I do something special? And that's sort of that nice spice of life that's going to be missing. And that's sort of, whereas the poor are going to have to worry about whether they're going to get the next meal or whether they're going to have a roof over their head. And that's
right.
That's real pressure. I mean, and I really feel for people who are in that situation. I try to help as much as I can, but I don't have the infrastructure like a lot of the great charities that we have do. Companies also are going to have less global influence on if they come out of the U.S., less competitive privilege than before COVID, and that's going to dampen our economy. We should expect taxation. This is going to cost a lot to get out of, no matter how you cut it. Even if we get lucky, we're down $12 trillion. We're the first time ever that we are in more debt than we're producing in a year. We got $30 trillion of debt. We're talking about a lot to work through. And so it may not be direct taxes, but it sure might be stealth taxes.
Right.
The fees for your automobile licensing may go to God knows what, $2,500 you want to drive your car more than 6 miles a week, that kind of stuff.
Well, you'll probably see it at the gas pump. You'll see it at,
Exactly. It's going to cost somewhere. Trust me. There's no way around it. And the truth is that we're all going to have to chip in a little bit in order to get through this. Sadly,
it's a giant shit sandwich, and we all got to take a bite. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for putting it plainly, Bob. Thanks.
Sorry.
That pretty much sums it up. Unfortunately. And there's going to be some structural legacies left behind. There are going to be some real winners and losers. I think we may lose a major airline carrier. I think we may, have permanent, new agencies that are watching over X, Y, and Z parts of our economy or parts of our populations that we, otherwise wouldn't have had. And that's especially if the COVID virus is prolonged. So that's sadly what the forecasts look like, and some of the conclusions. Man, oh man, we lost the first round of the war. It's just climbing on a worldwide basis in the United States, and the best country in the world.
And as Americans, we don't like to hear that.
I know. We're the best at and this thing, disproportionately, has us right by the short hairs, and it's not going away. That's the problem, unless we get a miracle. And we're on our way to a miracle, which is sort of interesting. It may be a partial miracle, but it's going to help us a little bit. But it's at least a year away before we get to the general public. It's and it's going to degrade our health, our political relationship, our economic system, all of our social systems, and we need to have really globally coordinated health, technology, and economic strategies. And certainly at a national level, we should have coordinated policy. And that's what's really hurting us, that we fragmented this whole thing up, took a single big bet, unhedged, hoped for the best, and now we're going to see the results in the next 12 to 18 months. And if it hits, that's great. It's unlikely to hit fully. We may get a partial payback, but after that, it's a long slog. U.S. we were disproportionately hit by this. We didn't have a scaled national strategy. We fragmented into offsetting state, local, and federal efforts, and we have a lot of confusion, a lot of conflicting information, lots of loss of credibility, no scale in our response, and it shows. We are underperforming the rest of the world by a long shot, and we've underestimated one of the biggest issues of our lives, sadly. We do have proven NPI control industries, but they're completely overwhelmed, and we've mismanaged them as a country. And we are making a single bet. And if it doesn't hit, it's a Hail Mary pass, really. Doesn't hit, we may lose this game for a longer period than we want. We need to deploy novel, disruptive economic tools and healthcare tools because we have a novel virus, and we're not doing that. We're not looking at disruptive technologies. We'll need to use, if we have a next shutdown, we'll need to actually do something during that shutdown that recreates our healthcare infrastructure, gives us the PPE.
Wait. So you're actually expecting us to learn from our mistakes, is what you're saying? I don't know how that's going to play out.
That's right. And there are other countries that are doing certain things better than us. There's not one country that's doing everything perfectly, but if you took the collection of all the stuff that's going right with these countries, we can find out we can do a lot better. And I think we will next time, but it's cost us a lot. And if you want, there's some things about things you can do yourself, and we can go through quickly. Don't make it worse. Don't start having big parties. Don't have huge weddings. Don't go to huge funerals. Don't invite the whole family in for Thanksgiving from all over the country. There's some things you can do that are smart that
And sadly, I feel like this is the same slide that's been up since March, and people just don't.
all I'm hearing in my head is oops, did that. Oops, did that.
You couldn't do that. Yeah, these are easy stuff.
Well, it is Michigan, Bob. It's hope.
Yeah.
There's a couple things in here that may sound kind of depressing, but organize yourself also means, if you've got elderly who are at risk, make sure they've got something in place that is more than just a will. You want to go to a living revocable trust with an incapacity clause. Otherwise, you're going to have even more problems. Those kinds of little things make a big difference in how it hits your own family.
Right.
And just you want to protect yourself, you want to protect your community, you want to protect your family, and that's one of the things you can do. And build your network, reach out for people who are getting depressed, so that they're not, and that helps both you and them to build your network. Get digital as fast as you can if you're not right now already. Obviously, if you can do it, get purposeful. It's you feel better if you have a purpose. If you're going out there, I always try to buy from local businesses as much as I can here in Ann Arbor because I like a lot of them. I want them to succeed.
Well, and I feel like this is answering the question that came from, I think, your third slide is how do you overcome that fatigue? Like, how do you get past quarantine fatigue?
That's right. That's a great point. And get political. Go and push your representatives, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter. Tell them we need relief on the supply chain. We need more of this stuff. We need more infrastructure. Give us our N95 masks. We need more testing. Give people more money so they can spend and support the economy for a little while, because as long as they're spending more and they're not destroying the economy, you'll build it up and it'll actually stand you in good stead. Eventually that starts to stop, but right now we're not in that position yet, even close to it, according to most economists, including myself. So stop if you're an investor or leader in healthcare that's profiteering. This isn't the time. I know that you've got your money, congratulations, but it's time to start giving a little bit back because it's hurting people. And then fix asymmetry to the extent that you can. If you see the poor, minorities, where they are, try to give them and support them as much as you can with contributions to their business, with extra food, with social work, with educational support, contribute to charities if you can, to improve the health outcomes, because that's what it's going to take in order to beat this thing in the long run.
For sure.
So anyway, that's what I told Harvard. They liked it, but what do you guys think?
I think I'm going to go grab a shot. In fact, it might just be it might not be a shot. It might just be a glass of bourbon. I'm not going to lie.
I've been bringing you guys along for a couple of weeks, right? So they hadn't seen any of this stuff since April. So they sort of hit a ton of bricks. So what you guys have sort of been, hearing a little bit, little tidbits, and I talked even a couple of weeks ago during Democratic National Convention, which didn't talk at all about COVID much, by the way.
Yeah.
Neither did the Republicans, by the way. I was like, wow. But they do talk a lot about the economy. So somehow a miracle's going to happen.
Well, I mean, Fred, this is America. We treat the symptom, not the cause. That gets back to burn the healthcare industry down to the ground. It was
a great show, but from both of them. But Yeah, they didn't really get to one of the crux of one of our bigger issues.
Right.
So what do you guys think? You think it's the right track, or?
Dude, this is amazing. In fact, I've got several requests that have asked, are these slides available on your website?
Yeah, I'll put them up. So they just gave me the release actually on Saturday when I wrote to you, Dave, to see if I appreciate the chance to get on so quickly. Kind of tell people what's going on as fast as possible, because a lot of the stuff is. It's funny when you tell Harvard what's going on September 1st. By September 5th, half the world's news stations are telling you,
Right.
We're going to have a vaccine in October. We're going to do this. The economy is going to be, reverse square root shape.
Wait, it's the wait. That's not what I. Hold on.
Right. So it's sort of, the stuff tends to come out, and so I want to make sure that you've got the full story for your fans. And I'll put it on the website. I think tomorrow.
Beautiful. Yeah. Either I'll find it or shoot me a link if you can, because I've been asked.
Fredbrown.com.
Yeah. I've been asked a few times, like, where can people walk through this and that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of where we are right now.
Did I mean, and in all due seriousness, I mean, as always, it is. I can't thank you enough for coming out and doing this, because I mean the information is invaluable. It's the pure raw data without any of the spin that I absolutely love, and I think more people need to get their hands on.
It's information I don't get on the news or on the paper.
You hear little tidbits like we need to do ubiquitous testing. What's that? That kind of stuff. Yeah, but I tried to give you a little bit more. So yeah.
No,
and Austin just chimed in and said, "Thanks, Fred. Hate it." Like.
Yeah, I wish the news was better, but at least you're getting the whole story.
Yeah, no, and honestly, like, to me, that's the most important thing. Like, I will take that all day, every day.
Oh well, it's been a pleasure, and I'll put everything up, and please, use it best you can and spread the word.
For sure.
Right. Fredbrown.com. Make sure to check them out. Again, can't thank you enough. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and literally too, not just a figurative term.
Right.
But we appreciate having you here. This is going to wrap up episode 364 of the IT and the D Show.
Oh, you don't want to hang out and talk more, Bob? At
No.
11:40? God, I seriously had no idea what the hell time it was.
I'm past my bedtime. I'm old man now. Thanks, Fred Brown, definitely for the time. Fredbrown.com. On behalf of Bob, Dave, and Randy, do us a favor. Drink up your drinks. Get your phone numbers. You don't got to go home. You just got to get the hell out of here. See you next week. Drive careful. Beat it.
See you guys.
Adios.